Economic Development and Tourism Committee meeting. My name is Deirdre Bartman. I'm chairperson of the committee. I'm going to be keeping my video off for connectivity purposes. Colleagues, today we are dealing with a briefing by the Department of DDAT and WESCRO on the 2020-2021 seasonal tourism statistics, the process for renewal of tour guide permits, and the assistance provided to our tour guides in this respect. I've received apologies from Member Nkondlo, from the HOD Fourie. Mr. Tufi is the acting HOD who is standing in. I've received apologies from the Minister, and not necessarily an apology, but our colleague, Member Mitchell, has now become the Minister of Transport and Public Works. And on behalf of the committee, I think I speak for all of us when I say that we wish him well ahead of this enormous task, and we wish him success in his respective endeavours. Colleagues, you are well aware that we're going to now introduce members, and then the officials can introduce themselves. I will start with the department introductions and then with the WESCRO, and then we'll jump straight into the presentations. Given that the department will likely be able to speak on everything compared to just some things such as WESCRO, I'm going to allow WESCRO to then go first in their presentation to us. And then I'll allow the department to do their presentation. We will then do all of the questions and answers afterwards. And the raise your hand function must please be used when you're asking questions. I will also have some feedback for the committee at the resolutions and action stage. But there's one feedback that I do need to highlight now, just so the members are aware of it for the end of the meeting. Members, if you would remember, we put questions together for the UIF. We indicated for the public hearing that members must send in questions. That deadline has passed. We have asked that the respective procedural officer and other officials from public education just neaten up the questions for us so that they are phrased correctly and also not written in a leading manner. Those questions have been sent to you, and I just please remind members to please approve those questions before the end of today's meeting. But I will do another reminder at the end of the meeting. And with that, I will ask that members now introduce themselves. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson. Andrikus van der Westhuizen, member of the committee.
Thank you, Member van der Westhuizen.
Good morning, Chairperson Matlodi Maseko, alternate member to the Standing Committee.
Thank you, Member Maseko, and welcome to the Finance, Economic Development and Tourism Committee. I know you've joined us on many oversights already, so the portfolio is not new to you. Thank you. Okay, I see there's another member online, but perhaps...
Good morning, Chairperson. This is Gillian Bosman. I'm a member of Parliament, and this is my first time joining this committee as just a guest.
Thank you so much. He's also the constituency of Kanaland, and I know they have lots of tourism questions from Kanaland always. So I'm very excited to have you with us today. Okay, Mr. Tufi, are you online with us?
Absolutely, Chairperson. Good morning, colleagues, and it's exciting to be having a deep dive on tourism. So I'm here with two of my colleagues from the department, and I'll have them introduce themselves. But Chairperson, just while I've got the floor, we'd planned our presentation that we would start with the DDAT, and it's a bit of a tag team, DDAT and WESCRO. So we're comfortable to just start with DDAT and then flow into the WESCRO presentation. But if you're comfortable with that, Chair.
I'm happy with that. If it's going to be easier, then let's do that. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I'll ask Ilse and Jacques just to introduce yourself, and then over to you, Tim, for you and your team.
Thank you, Rashid. Good morning, Ilse van Schalkwyk. I'm the Chief Director responsible for tourism at the Western Cape Department of Economic Development and Tourism.
Good morning, Chairperson. My name is Jacques Stolz. I'm Director of Tourism at the department.
Good morning, members. Tim Harris, the CEO of WESCRO. I'm going to hand over to Monica and the rest of the team to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, honourable members. My name is Monica Ewell. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at WESCRO.
Okay, are those all the officials online with us today?
I see we also have two or three further Westgrow colleagues. If you could introduce yourselves, Janine, Lana, and I think I saw Corne. Please go ahead. Thank you, Chairperson.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, colleagues. I'm Janine Buerta, Acting Head of Research at Westgrow. Thank you for having me in your meeting.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Good morning, Chair. I'm the Acting Head for the Leisure Unit in Westgrow.
Welcome. Thank you so much. Acting HOD, you can jump straight into the presentation.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, colleagues, and welcome to all the new members. Monica from Westgrow, member Bosman. Colleagues, it's exciting. You know, yesterday was Africa Day, and Tim and I and HOD Mogali were talking to various consulate generals about the potential of South Africa and the need for us to open ourselves up in terms of a trade and investment destination. And it was just so insightful to see the enthusiasm from our colleagues around the continent. So it's exciting to talk to you today about this key export commodity, which is tourism. And the presentation is really going to be led by Ilse, and then with Monica adding in at the end with some of the amazing campaigns we've done for the year. But the important thing is that since COVID hit us dramatically, tourism was one of the first industries to get hit, and it seems to be the last ones to recover, simply because of the nature of the moving parts that's required for tourism, if you call it that way. But this idea of a three-pronged approach, starting with containment, then moving to adaptation, and then moving to recovery, has been part of it's been the lifeblood of what we've been doing for the last 15 months. And it's the reason why there is some semblance of survival. And I say survival because it has not been easy. It's an industry that employs a lot of people in the Western Cape, and it's a concern for us. But we are, and what I'd like to say is we're all over it, and it's fantastic to see the team effort by Westgrow and DDAT. So Ilse, you can flight the presentation, and then I'll just speak to the first few slides and then hand over to you. So let's just have a check if Chairperson, let's put it into presentation mode. Can you see the slides?
Yes, I'm able to.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Ilse. So next slide. So the three responses, and most of our time is really going to be explaining the tourism response to COVID-19. And when we responded as tourism, it's all travelers. So as you can imagine, the kind of work we've done to make tourism possible, I'd like to extend that to travel. So everyone who needs to move around the Western Cape for business have also had to have had the benefit of some of the services we've provided. And that means it's linked into the value chains of so many other industries. We'll then talk about the seasonal tourism statistics. It's good to see that we've had some semblance of a season just back in Easter and even in December. And then we'll go through this. What I find quite exciting is the now online process for tourist guide permits, which was many years in the making, and COVID is the kind of thing that drives you in terms of going digital and getting online, and it happened just at the right time. So next slide, please, Ilse. So in terms of our response to COVID, you know, I had to do a talk once on can the tourism industry recover, and my answer was we don't even have a choice. It simply has to, because as I said, it's the lead industry for so many other industries. So I'm going to leave it just at that slide and hand over you, Ilse, to dive us into some of the detail. All right, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. So just with regards to the following presentation, we're going to be proceeding in terms of sorry, I'm hearing a bit of an echo. There we go, it's got, thank you. So what has changed in terms of COVID and in terms of tourism after COVID has hit? So the first thing was in relation to the domestic market, and domestic market will drive recovery. We've seen this globally. It's a global driver in all the different countries because COVID has impacted all the markets across the globe. And the potential for pent-up demand for leisure travel is something we've definitely seen in terms of domestic markets. where many people that were able to travel internationally now are not able to do so because of flight bans, etc., on South Africa, and they're now looking at different destinations within the country to travel to, which we want to ensure the Western Cape gets its fair share of. The second thing in terms of what has changed is with regards to consumers. So our consumers will be different. Their spending patterns have changed, the economic climate has changed, which impacts investment and disposable income. And thirdly, what has changed is the industry. So the whole supply side of tourism has changed, not as drastically, a bit slower. People are trying to do as much as they can to save certain businesses, but we have seen many businesses closing down. And one of the aspects which we are keeping our finger on the pulse on is in terms of what does the supply chain look like. We've seen a shift in terms of for tour operators selling some of their fleet. A lot of them have been able, they are trying to do as much as possible to become resilient and pivot to ensure that their businesses doesn't collapse. So the different industry that we'll be working with over the next 24 months as we move towards hopefully a recovery stage is definitely a different picture. So how has the Western Cape responded to the crisis? And as Rashid mentioned, it's not something which we decided to draft the strategy on and then only start working on. We've had to really start on what we talk about is the CAR process in terms of containment, adaptation and recovery since March last year already. I remember our first meeting where we were engaging with businesses in terms of how they've been impacted when events started closing down, and just when we went into hard lockdown. So this approach has really been with us, and we're moving, and sometimes we move it back in terms of adaptation, but it's much more strongly in terms of the recovery stage. So in terms of containment, the efforts were very much in terms of providing business support. You'll see examples. I'm going to be showing just a few key things in relation to the COVID Content Centre, keeping employees and clients safe, efforts we did with regards to workplace safety, the supply chain functioning, as I was just mentioning. And then in terms of the adaptation phase, it's the knowledge sharing, the best practice learnings. We've had so many webinars trying to keep people up to date, ensure that they understand what's going on in the environment and how they're changing, pivoting to using more virtual and technology-enabled solutions for them to still continue trading. And then the new ways of doing business. So as I mentioned, 4IR and the adaptation which the industry had to do there, as well as government, has been quite substantial. And then, of course, destination readiness. I'll also be sharing examples of that, but it's very much what did we have to put in place to be able to send that message to the world in terms of saying, come and visit South Africa and the Western Cape in particular, and that we are ready and that you can still have a wonderful experience, whether you're a domestic or an international tourist, and to feel safe. And then moving into recovery, it's just with regards to responding to consumer behavior, emphasis on visitor safety, incentivizing travel, and then marketing to the domestic and the international tourists. So as I mentioned, just a few key examples, and I'm just going to flip through some of these slides. Containment, we looked at the COVID Content Centre, which played a huge role, and these stats are actually doubled after we've done this presentation. But over it was probably when this was launched through Wesgro, and they did amazing work on this, just to provide a one-stop shop where people could get information with regards to what support do I have, what funding is available, what regulation has changed. I remember in when we were in the midst of it, when we were moving through lockdown level 5, 4, and 3, etc., how weekly we would have sometimes get different regulations which would impact people and the business's ability to operate. So the COVID Content Centre really played a pivotal role in terms of providing access to information, as well as where people could have queries as they were trying to survive the initial lockdown level 5 and 4 in particular. Then we're moving into the adaptation phase. So as I mentioned, very much our focus here was on destination readiness. So what did we have to put in place to ensure the Western Cape is able to operate safely? And the little green logo that you see, that Safe Travels stamp that we got from the World Travel Tourism Council, in which many other of our products got in the Western Cape, was to send that measure in terms of what have we done, what protocols, and it was almost our pledge to a traveller and a visitor to say what do we have in place. So certain key efforts which I'd like to highlight was working with the TBCSA and with South Africa Tourism and National Department of Tourism and all of our business and industry stakeholders to ensure that there's protocols in place from a health and safety perspective. And many of this will probably stay on with us beyond COVID. So a lot of these health and safety practices are in play. We've had training sessions. We appointed an occupational health and safety expert as well. We ran workshops within all the districts to make sure people are aware of this, that they've got comments and questions. There's great online tools. Our westerncape.gov.za tourism safety platform, we ensured we literally had, we threw the book at the industry in terms of just ensuring that they have all the relevant tools that they needed to ensure that they've adapted as a business. Because without this, where the impacts of COVID will just continue to linger. We also then included the development of the Safe Travels website, which Wesgro launched, where we've got information for, and this is constantly updated for a traveller that's interested in visiting the Western Cape. What are the regulations? What do I have to be concerned of? Some of our tourism safety efforts are still on there as well. So this website played a big role in terms of providing relevant digital content for a visitor. Monica will also speak about this a little bit later. And then just to give you another example of our adaptation efforts towards season readiness. So we ran a campaign in terms of COVID-19 doesn't take a holiday. We ran this over the December and the January period, and with billboards driving to the province, posters at key tourism hotspots, etc., just to continue creating that safe travels and messaging. We also developed tourism safety tips, which spoke about COVID-19 and traveling in South Africa and what you need to have in place. And we definitely, it might have not been, and we distributed this at all the airports and tourism hotspots. But what we definitely see now is a slight uptick of international visitors who are traveling once they've been vaccinated, but also for again to our domestic visitors as well in terms of what are the protocols when they're visiting the Western Cape. So moving on to the R of the car. So our efforts towards tourism recovery, this is key to surely just put it out there that tourism can bounce back, but it will look differently and it will happen at different stages. And you've seen this as well in the news and just in terms of our country as we move to different phases of COVID infection rates, the third wave, which everybody's worried about. So there's the different ways in terms of which we will be able to adapt. And the parts of the tourism value chain will be affected in terms of things which we don't often have control over, but we have to influence, such as travel bans, writing submissions, legislation, lobbying efforts, etc. Secondly, in terms of the change in consumer behavior, the way they travel, that has changed. Bookings are done on a very shorter period. And the way the consumer wants to feel a little bit of safety in terms of using a tour operator, etc. And then de-risking of the industry through mechanisms such as the vaccine rollout is key, especially with regards to international travel. The vaccine rollout and our infection rate is key decision-making factors, which many of our international markets utilize when they decide to put a travel ban on South Africa, never mind the variant 501YB2. So recovery will also look different for every country, depending on the state of infections and readiness in terms of health and safety. This is very relevant in terms of our international markets, because it's not just what's happening inside our borders, but also within their countries, which changes the travel patterns and the linkages with other countries in terms of them able to actually visit South Africa, like we've just been experiencing with the UK and their travel ban, especially as they're one of our key source markets. In the Western Cape, we've definitely seen an upswing in domestic leisure travel. It doesn't replace international, the portion of our market share in terms of international visitors, but the domestic leisure travel has definitely improved, and it has already had a positive impact on the economy. Just getting money back into the system is essential. The difficulty there is that a lot of domestic travel happens over weekends and school holidays, etc. But it has played a definite role, and we are definitely prioritizing domestic travel in the Western Cape. So we are ready to welcome back our international visitors, having gone through all the destination readiness efforts, who will be able to travel despite bans in relation to the COVID-19 variant 501YB2. And there's strong efforts being done in terms of lobbying and the Call It By Its Name campaign because of the impact that's had by calling it the South African variant in terms of a travel ban. Our long-term strategic approach for tourism, inclusive of long-term recovery and growth, will be captured in the Western Cape Tourism Blueprint, which is our strategy focusing on medium and long-term tourism recovery as well as growth for the Western Cape over the next 10 years. And this is at an advanced stage, and we are approaching the launch date quite soon. And then, of course, last but not least, the short to medium-term responses to tourism recovery is underway through numerous efforts by the department and Wesgro. And this will be described, Monica will be presenting on this in some of the following slides. And examples will be in terms of the destination marketing campaigns, which are being launched to just make sure that the Western Cape globally and domestically is top of mind. So I'm just at this stage going to hand over to Monica to take you through some of the recovery campaign messaging material. Thank you. Monica?
Thanks, Ilse, and good morning again, Honourable Chair, Honourable Members. I'm happy to take you through a couple of slides of the work that Wesgro has done over the past year, as well as talk a little bit about the work that's happening currently. So this first slide depicts quite a tongue-in-cheek domestic campaign that we ran in the middle of last year, based on the insight that the domestic traveller wasn't able to go anywhere else and might have planned a holiday to Bali or to Italy. And so we used stills from across the province to demonstrate that, you know, the winelands are as beautiful as Italy, or the area around Swellendam is as beautiful as Sweden, and so on. And it basically, the tagline basically was, "It feels like far away." So this was, the objective was to entice inter-provincial travellers and intra-provincial travellers, even in the time where people weren't allowed to travel outside of their province. So this was the work that we did in that space. Thanks, Ilse. The slide depicts the domestic campaign that we ran in partnership with Travel Start. We started in December of last year to entice domestic travel to Cape Town and the Western Cape. The tagline was around "Kids Stay Free," so we wanted to demonstrate that there was value for money for travel into the Western Cape. Thanks, next slide. These were the results. So the first burst was from the end of November to the 13th of January. The Kids Stay Free bookings and accommodation generated almost 2,800 bookings through the site. The top Kids Stay Free areas booked were Cape Town, Beaufort West and Knysna, so lovely spread across the province. We generated 9 million rand in sales revenue, excluding flight revenue, and bookings with kids increased from 26 in 2019 to 243 in 2020, which allowed us to position the destination as family-friendly and wallet-friendly. We did, as I mentioned, a second burst over March and April to catch the Easter bookings, and again generated almost 7,000 flight bookings to almost 20 million rand and 525 accommodation bookings to the value of 1.7 million rand. We also worked really hard in our convention bureau. As you will all be aware, business meetings and business events and big conferences are going to, in all likelihood, be the last to return. And we were very active in demonstrating over the last 12 months that meetings can be held safely and that we can do these in line with health protocols. We did, however, also still in the period secure 15 new bids with an estimated economic impact of just under 500 million rand. We did 3 proof of concept conferences in a hybrid fashion. The first was just a proof of concept conference in general in July of last year. And then very proudly, the ICCA International Congress last year decided to do various regional hubs rather than one large international congress. And we hosted the Africa Regional Hub in the Western Cape in November 2020. And lastly, in February 2021, we hosted Business Events Week, which was also a hybrid event. You can see that image in the bottom of the screen. It was basically a television studio style setup with all the speakers and the entertainers in the studio, and then all of the participants logging on online. Thank you. What we also did was trying to manage the reputation around travel in the COVID era. We went to the Cape Town International Airport and we interviewed some international tourists who were on their way back home and asked them some key questions. How was your stay? What was your experience of a holiday in the time of COVID? Did you feel safe? What was it like doing a long-haul flight with COVID protocols in place? And the feedback was resoundingly positive. These video assets live on our Safe Travels website and are therefore usable for anyone that would like to repurpose the content to demonstrate that tourism within a COVID time is actually still very enjoyable and very, very safe. Thank you. We're very proud to say that we have launched an international campaign. At the moment, we are focusing on Holland and Germany. We are very cognizant of the fact that the international travel space is very competitive and very cluttered. There is a lot of pent-up demand. There's a lot of people all over the world that are dreaming of going on their next long-haul holiday, and we want to make sure that we remain top of mind in that noisy space. What we did was we identified a few Dutch and German residents of the Western Cape who came here on holiday and fell so in love with the Western Cape province that they decided to stay. And so they talk in the first person about what they love about the Western Cape, what they love to do while they're here, and we filmed them doing those things in wide open spaces, scenic beauty, lots of social distancing, braaiing outside, going for hikes. You see there's an image of the lady surfing. And we find that these never-ending tourists speaking in the first person with that authentic voice really tells a story in a way that we could never tell it ourselves. The position that we're adopting is people have been locked down in Europe for so long and they are just dreaming of getting back into a good space. This content is not at a very hard sell tone. It is very much around once you're able to travel again, you need to remember that you need to come to the Western Cape. At the moment, these videos are running on our digital assets, but we do also have in our plans to work with some native PR partners, Condé Nast. We're also going to have an exciting partnership with TripAdvisor, which you see down at the bottom of the slide. Sorry, just also to mention perhaps that we are also in the plans of looking at the UK as a market, but that's obviously for later on in the year when the position in that market has improved. Thanks, Ilse. Air Access Recovery Plan. The steering committee of the Air Access team of the Cape Town Air Access has already approved their recovery plan last year in July. The 6 focus areas you can see there were obviously based on what the situation in the country was at the time. So obviously at the time we had travel bans. We weren't able to get any international flights to land in the country. But suffice to say that we are continuing to target the international air charter market, targeting international carriers to resume services to Cape Town. And now, as I said, we're focusing on retaining and performance of returning routes, as well as increasing connectivity, and then ultimately also expanding the capacity of airlines as we go forward. Thank you. And this is now your slide again, Ilse, so I'm going to hand back to you. Thank you very much.
Monica.
Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. And then just some of the last examples of work we're doing with regards to the recovery stage is in terms of the lobbying effort, in terms of the remote working visa campaign. You would have seen a lot of noise and interest in terms of a trending profile we've done last week when Minister wrote to the National Minister of Home Affairs and Tourism with the submission for the remote working visa amendments to the regulations. So our response with regards to this was very much to see what else can we do to attract additional visitors to the province. And one of this was the efforts in terms of what it's loosely referred to as a digital nomad, but how do we get individuals that are economically active, but they can work from anywhere with the changes in terms of the digital world to come and work and live in South Africa, in particular the Western Cape, for a year or longer. Still work for their global companies, but live and work and spend their dollars and pounds and euros in the Western Cape. So this is very much a response. So we've seen many countries globally doing this. And for us to be able to maximize on this opportunity, we would require some of the visa regulations to be amended. And hence why our 3-pronged approach in terms of this was, 1, for the remote working visa submission, which contained details and proposals of amended changes to the regulations from the Immigration Act to the Minister of Home Affairs and Tourism, and that was done last week. Then the second approach was for the remote working portal, which will go live in the next week or two, which Wesgro is working on, to provide a website with a one-stop shop approach to assist potential digital nomads who want to apply and come and live here with logistical requirements, questions they might have, information to be sent back to them in terms of making the transition as easy as possible. And then, of course, the third aspect was the Digital Nomad campaign. This was a digital campaign which was launched in partnership with Airbnb to promote remote working, as well as provide solutions in terms of accommodation, as well as linking them to different experiences that they would like to have while they're staying here. We've definitely seen a uptick in terms of people inquiring opportunities for a longer stay period and accommodation, and what does that look like versus just a weekend trip. So those are really our three strong efforts we're putting together for the remote working visa campaign. And then now the hard part, the second part of the presentation, is just going to be a focus on terms of the response for the tourism statistics over the season for the Western Cape. So in terms of this, for tourism performance, just to take you a little bit back into that frame of mind, the data for December 2020 revealed that as an industry that has been completely battered by COVID-19, relating to the different lockdown levels, both here and abroad, there was definitely an impact in terms of tourism performance. International arrivals were much lower, and this continued to show a depressed state, especially in relation to cancellations or concerns regarding the 501 YB2 COVID variant, and a response from our key international source markets. Beach bans resulted in a widespread last-minute cancellations when we were back on a lockdown level 2 at the December period, in January period last year. So this really impacted our summer season from a domestic performance perspective, especially in the Western Cape and our coastal municipalities. Then in terms of the international passenger performance, so just to note that we've developed quite a few different tourism indicators that we use to monitor performance, based on data availability, as well as just to track it. There's not a silver bullet with regards to this, because the official statistics published by South African Stats SA and SAT is always lagged. So we try and find a different approach to looking at different indicators to monitor this at a shorter term, reliable effort. And one of these is in terms of the Cape Town International Airport arrival and departure statistics. So in December, we saw somewhat of an improvement in international passenger recovery, as well as load factors in Cape Town International Airport, but international arrivals remain substantially lower than previous years. Then in terms of the domestic passenger performance, we look at both Cape Town and George Airport. Domestic recovery has been positive, with only one out of 13 routes not re-established, although the number of flights in the routes are much less, but the routes are activated as per se. So there has been a decline in load factors comparing November and October 2020. Overall, the passenger recovery rate in December was only 51% if we compare it to December 2019. In terms of the George Airport traffic statistics, we've seen a recovery at the airport, which has been quite positive since December 2020, despite the beach bans and other restrictions. So people were still traveling. It's just in terms of the impact in terms of their activities, which had a change. And I've been there quite a few times in the last month, and George Airport is definitely much busier. And through our efforts we did there in terms of opening the airport up, that was a huge game changer for that particular airport and that region. Then with regards to the visitor numbers at top attractions, so we reached out to all the top attractions just to see what was their visitor numbers over the season. One of the bleak outcomes of that was, and it's to be expected based on all the information we've just shared, there was a 60% decline in visitors over the peak tourism season, which they often need to carry them through the colder winter months in the Western Cape. So you'll see that between Kirstenbosch, Robben Island, V&A Waterfront, we often use them, the big six, as we would call it in the tourism industry, to measure footfall and see how many people were actually, and you'll see there in terms of the 1920 shift, the decline is right through. Then in terms of hotel occupancy, so here we use STR data. This just looks at the hotel occupancy in terms of the number of people versus the bed nights. And this was around 30% in terms of the hotel occupancy across the Western Cape. And there's definitely been, for the formal 3, 4, and 5 star, the absence of business tourists and international guests has had a major impact. And the 5-star hotels in Cape Town were the worst affected. So in conclusion, while December and early January performance was far below expectation, there has been some further recovery. So we have seen since, let's say, about late March and April into May, the recovery has, for example, the STR data showed a little bit better occupancy, but not at a 50-60%. But we have seen particularly notably increases, for example, during the Easter weekend, etc. And then the domestic terminal at Cape Town International Airport saw just over 61,000 passengers for the Easter weekend. So as I mentioned, the key holiday periods, school holidays and weekends are a much better indication of what's happening in terms of our domestic performance. The recovery rate indicators we measure it and we monitor it monthly, where the statistics are available for both domestic and international tourists. So that's just on that slide. So I just want to conclude the presentation with the last portion in relation to the tourist guide permits and the support we provided by DDAT to applicants. So we went through a process in terms of the renewal with the tourist guide permit. This was previously a paper-based system, and this is the first online tourist guide system in the country. In terms of the Tourism Act, we are mandated to offer the service from DDAT's side as the Provincial Tourism Registrar. So in September last year, we launched the online registration system for tourist guides. So the tourist guides are able to apply in terms of if they would like to be a tourist guide. They're able to renew their permits. So that's usually a permit is valid for 3 years. And then if they would, for example, they've lost or they want to get a new badge or card, etc., to apply for a replacement. This has really been an effort we've done with CEI in terms of this, just to offer a better digital service. And it still had a few growing pains, but it's a much better effort than a paper-based system, especially when people were not able to come into the office and hard lockdown, and they were able to still complete their efforts in terms of their renewals or applications. So that's just the live link in terms of the customer service portal where you could access the system in terms of your application. As I mentioned, new registrations, renewals and replacements can be done through this approach. And we are about to launch the new functionality of being able to pay through your payment gateway. Previously, it was done either through an EFT or you had to physically come into the office and pay at a cashier. So we've been working on the next upgrade in terms of you can pay now by card through a payment gateway with our relevant banker. Tourist guides who experience technical difficulties, etc., we've been providing assistance with as well online, and they can still, if they don't have internet, for example, we still help them with manual submissions. The office back-end team will just capture it electronically onto the system. So we still are able to cater for somebody if they want to come into the office where the team can actually respond. Okay, that's it from our side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ilse and Monica. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the patience of the members. That was a long presentation. We're on standby now for any further questions of clarity. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Acting HOD. I think we have different definitions of long presentations. But members, with that, please could I see the first set of hands? I see Member van der Westhuizen. Are there any other hands? Okay, for now, Member van der Westhuizen, and if there are no other hands, I'll go after Member van der Westhuizen. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you very much, not only for the presentation, but I think we really owe these officials a great word of thanks for what they've done, and I really love the creativity that marketing people often display, as we've just witnessed. But Chair, there are a few things, and I can just confirm that yes, my own experience of somebody that loves traveling is that the leisure travel market has really, or is currently doing quite well with domestic travelers. I had to be in the Cedarburg this past weekend, and finding accommodation within a chalet has been challenging. And I've just spoken earlier this morning to somebody else who also had to be there at another point, and they also said, confirmed that, you know, it seems to me as if accommodation with leisure activities, outdoor activities, is doing well, particularly in certain areas. But Chair, I want to come back. Domestic travelers, and you've used the word wallet-friendly travel. My impression is that some of them, and I think you've used the word Big Six in the Western Cape, that those venues have not really reduced their tariffs, and perhaps you can correct me, and I'm referring here to places like Kirstenbosch, Robben Island, the aerial cableway, sandparks. Now, you know, how can we claim to say, but listen, you know, we're responsive to market supply and demand when these prices have not been significantly reduced? Secondly, when we come to accommodation establishments, I've been personally wanting to benefit from the fact that, you know, accommodation should be more freely available, and that the competition for accommodation should have increased considerably. And yet my experience has been that it seems to be very few accommodation establishments realizes the concept of bums on seats, so to say, or restaurants. Perhaps you are monitoring those prices, and perhaps you can just tell us whether my impression is correct, and whether what we're seeing currently is just your normal winter offers that we've seen in the past as well, and whether the Western Cape has really become a more wallet-friendly destination. My second question, Chair, is many international travelers and even friends of mine that would like to go to other countries have said, no, we've learned our lesson last year, end of March, when many of our friends have been trapped in countries where they didn't want to be, when all the flights were cancelled, and suddenly, you know, people found themselves stranded in places where they didn't want to be. And I think it would help a lot if we could assure travelers to South Africa that should such a severe lockdown be required again, that it will be with enough notice. So my question is, to what extent have you been able to speak to other government departments, and particularly to the COVID-19 Command Council, to not repeat the damage that they did? Because I think that experience end of March was so damaging in the psyche of many tourists that in itself is something I believe that should and could have been avoided, and that would have put us on a far better path. So how can we ensure that that experience is not repeated? Can we get any assurances in this regard? Can we assure visitors to South Africa that they will not be trapped, and that they would be able to return home as, even if not as planned, but at least that they will be able to do that? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Member Bosman, I saw your hand, and then Member Maseko.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, I want to say thank you to Mr. Tofi and his team for this presentation. For someone who's not from this cluster, it's really good to see all the hard work that's being done to save the economies of lots of our small towns. My question is a more practical one. I'd like to know how local municipalities, specifically those that are sort of quite broken and does not have the capacity to run proper local economic development plans, how do the tourism offerings in those towns benefit from some of the forward destination marketing that's being done? And also, who is the team in DDAT as well as Wesgro that a municipality or tourism partners in a place like Kanaland need to get in touch with to make sure that their local festivals and local offerings are also benefiting from a lot of the forward marketing that's being done to make sure that we get tourists from outside of the province as well as from outside of our borders once they do come back.
Thank you. Is that your only question, Member Bosman?
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Member Maseko?
Thank you very much, Chair. And then I just want to thank the department with the presentation. It's good to be back to listen to the good work that they are continuing to do. I think the last time I was in this portfolio, and it was always very nice to come and listen to all innovative things they're doing in really putting our province on the map. Now, before the question, I just want to make a request. If DDAT and the Wesgro, when they do have the webinars, if it's possible for them to invite the standing committee to also be part of that. It's always nice to do an oversight and also listen to the contributors out there of the tourism, to how do they feel about all those innovative things the department and the Wesgro they are doing. So that I believe it will be appreciated from the side of the members. And the first question that I do have is about the cross-border tourism. I mean, after the COVID-19, is there any new innovative ways that you are handling that in that space? Or so far you are still trying to get the basis correct before you can go and champion the CBT within? And if that is happening already, which are the countries that you have started to approach or you are looking at in exchanging, whether being the cultural or the innovative? I mean, the fourth industrial revolution is here, and there might be the innovative way that you feel it can add or you can learn from in this COVID-19, or are we the number one within the world, or globally we are number one in tourism on championing tourism after the COVID-19? And the second one, it will be, I just want to find out, I don't know, Chair, how to put this, but the local tourism as a heading for my question. We have municipalities that do have the tourism sites, and I'm going to take Diewaterskloof, my former constituency, that has beautiful chalets that the tourism should be happening there. And I know it's a local government, but I believe that to a certain extent, this department also can play a role. They've got the chalets next to the dam there that now they are just white elephants, and they're being invaded one way or another. The things are being stolen from those. Do you as a department vet the municipalities that have the assets like that to try to assist in trying to promote the local tourism, or it has to be the municipality that comes and asks help without the department maybe vetting to see? Because we are not working in silo, I take it. And what we have within the province for tourism, I tend to believe that you have to have that in your books to say, where can we add value without really spending a lot of money? Because if already the structures are there or the infrastructure is there, it's just to maximize for the commission within those municipalities or revenue generation within those municipalities. So how do we go about with what we have to maximize to profit? That's basically what I'm asking, using the municipalities' assets. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Given that we don't have any other questions, I'll just throw mine in now, some which will link to the previous ones. In terms of the remote working visa submission, as per the presentation that you've indicated that the Minister has now sent the submission to National Minister of Home Affairs, what was contained in the submission regarding the remote working visa? And could you please forward this to the committee as well? In terms of the partnering with Airbnb, while it is all well to partner with Airbnb, which is a wonderful, wonderful company, and they do wonderful work in democratizing some of the tourism space, what I would like to find out is how is this program partnering with rural areas? Because sometimes when you want to go on holidays, you don't necessarily want to then go on holiday to the city area of that country where you go on holiday. You want to go to your Kannalands and your Theewaterskloof and your Beauforts and your Laingsburgs, and you want to go and see your Drakensbergs and your Breda Valleys and everything. So how are you partnering with that Airbnb program to assist the rural area in maximizing this program? And especially because some of our rural areas don't have the same type of broadband and or fiber facilities. So how are we ensuring that when we do partner with this Airbnb program, that we also assist those who go onto Airbnb and put their homes on there, that they also get advice, for example, put Wi-Fi in your place so that when someone comes and lives here for a month, then at least they can, send an email or Skype their family and so on. And then I wanted to find out, it's just an idea, it's possibly a bad idea, but an idea nevertheless. Is it possible to launch a type of find a friend in the rural areas? Because you get on Airbnb, you get the experiences. And for a friend's birthday recently, I bought an Airbnb experience where in another country, you go and see something online and the person walks with you along the area. And essentially in this regard, you wouldn't want a Deirdre or a Tim or a Rashid to show Laingsburg around online or at the Airbnb where you've checked in. But you want your Lindy Potgieters, for example, from Laingsburg, and your Tannie Poppies from Laingsburg, for example, to essentially give like an Airbnb experience where they then show Laingsburg to the person who has possibly come to this area for a month, 2 months, 3 months to come live there for this remote working program. And then I know you have a lot of training and funding links, and you have a lot of people who help with a lot of wonderful things. But because you guys send out so many emails, so many different links regarding your funding and training, sometimes all the good work that you guys do get lost. So last year during COVID, what I did as constituency head is I went and I got all the different links from the different departments and entities from the provincial government and also from national. And I put them all on a little pamphlet in the front and the back. And I literally walked house for house for house, and I put the different links in every house's post box. Because some of the people in the rural areas will never know what DDAT and Wesgro is doing. And is it possible for between the two of you and possibly the other entities within the DDAT sphere to put together for us a little pamphlet with all those different funding and training links and who to contact for what for help, so that those of us who are constituencies in rural areas, then we don't WhatsApp you guys 5 times a day in order to find out who we should contact, because then we will have all the links together instead of every time when you drive out 30 kilometers, try to now get signal in order to go onto the link that you've sent us. And then regarding the tour guide permits that you are now doing online, I would like to know, how are you going to communicate the moving online of the system to people especially within our rural areas? And how will you communicate the new payment process system, which will also be introduced, which is wonderful because it will allow people to do things easier and faster as well. And then finally, I wanted to find out, in Laingsburg specifically, and I'm sure that there are other constituencies with other crops and produce that have similar problems. But Wesgro has this new thing called the virtual trade missions, where previously you would have a delegation going to the Netherlands, for example, to go have trade exhibitions and to partner with people commercially, and it's online now. How do we get our rural business people, entrepreneurs, people who want to now scale their business in terms of the export sector? How do we get them as part of those trade missions? I know I've emailed Wesgro previously regarding the onion seed farmers in Laingsburg, because Beyers has most now left the country. So how do we get those people in industries with produce and seed and crops who are very monopolized at the moment across the country due to the way the industry nationally has been structured? How do we get those little farmers who now want to scale as a group? How do we get them to be part of these virtual trade missions? Thank you. Given that I've also now asked a lot of questions, there were 3 members before me, I'm going to allow you to answer those first, and then we'll take a second round of questions. I have received a WhatsApp that member Makamba Bocha is having internet connectivity problems. Siraj, if you can maybe just check in with member Makamba Bocha. But she has submitted an apology in the meantime while she's trying to sort that out. Acting HOD, I'm going to allow you to allocate the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chairperson, and fantastic questions. I counted 11 of them, and I'll just go through them briefly and allocate them accordingly. I just want to acknowledge the thanks and to say that it has been an incredible effort. So yeah, this is a moment I ditto that. I say thank you to everyone. It's been all hands on deck. I think I see people all taking leave now, and it's because everyone skipped December leave, so people have worked flat out and through it all. So I really appreciate Member van der Westhuizen and Member Maseko's thank yous, and we have missed you, Member Maseko. So the first question I have was the pricing at the Big Six. Now I'm going to go, Tim, perhaps after I've done, you can add to that, you and your team. But I can say to you that without fail, each of these large Big Six attractions have developed various models, Member van der Westhuizen, to allow locals a variable pricing model. So I'm, for example, a member of the Kirstenbosch Botanical Society, and it allows me one price and any number of visits with my family of 4 for the whole year. And that's the kind of variable pricing. Or they have something like a card which costs you, I think it's 120 Rand, and it gives you 12 little clips, 12 little stamps to go to what is normally an expensive place like Boulders. You can get it effectively for 12 Rand because you get 10 clips on a 120 Rand card, and it's only if you're local. So they've had to keep their international pricing to some extent, but there generally always are ways that locals can access it. But Tim, I would love you to add, or any member of your team. And then Ilse, if you could please talk to the second question on the repatriation. I know we are basically one team when it comes to supporting tourists and to repatriate. Perhaps you can talk about some of that legislative work that's being done, and we do certainly hope to not damage that. We don't want our Lions rugby supporters stuck here forever. And then Member Bosman, if you drive along Route 62 and you go through Calitzdorp, you could be anywhere in the world. So if you weren't on this campaign, we certainly should do some pictures of Calitzdorp and say you could be in the middle of in Vegas, right, or somewhere in the middle of American outback or the Australian outback. So Ilse, would you please pick up on who specifically, and in our team, members, local municipalities can contact? Yeah, that's squarely in your team, and we have very specific people who handle that. And then the webinar question, just a note, Member Maseko, we certainly will invite you, that if Jacques and team can just note that one. We don't have to answer it, but we will certainly invite you if we have any webinars. I think it's very valuable. You guys you would love it, and I think it will keep you informed. And then on the cross-border tourism, Monica Uhl, your private sector background would help you, but I'd love you to take question 4, what I have as question 4. And then question 5, Ilse, if you could handle that as well, the Tierwartus Kloof question. I mean, it's a very good question, Member Maseko. I know we've supported, for example, there was a triathlon which I participated in, and we actually funded that event. So we do work deep into all the regions, both in terms of our funding of events, but Ilse, perhaps you could speak to the work you're doing on the assets of municipalities with the national government. And then for all the questions from Chairperson Bartman, Ilse, you will handle the remote visa one. I know that's squarely in your court. And then the Airbnb question, Tim or Monica. Monica, I know that's your campaign, and please specify the work we're doing in the rural areas. And I love the idea about find a friend. It sounds like find my phone, but the idea of finding a friend. Yeah, certainly I'm not going to walk around a little town. I'd love to get a local person who can let you really taste and feel the local. So again, I just acknowledge that it's a great idea. Let's take it on board. And then Ilse, if you could just speak to the last two, or the 2 year. The one is the idea of a page. I can take that up directly. In fact, remember, Chairperson Bartman, I will speak to our comms unit and see if we can produce something like a leaflet. We currently have that available on all our websites, but I hear what you're saying. A sort of rather low-tech version of doing a leaflet might be useful. Let us come back to you on that idea. And Ilse, if you could speak to the tour guide question and just explain how we get that out through social media and through SMSing all our members. And then lastly, Tim, the virtual trade missions, of course. I think we probably have good examples where we already have the small farmers, but how do we get more of the small farmers on those virtual and hopefully in the future physical trade missions? So let's start from the top and we can jump straight into it. So I'll go to you, Tim, first. Perhaps you can grab the ones that you were allocated here. Thank you. Tim, are you with us? Yeah, are you there?
Tim, you need to unmute.
So we're not hearing from Tim. Can I ask maybe?
Is there someone in the same office that can walk to Tim's office?
I'm happy to take a stab at some of those questions, Honourable Chair and Acting HOD, if that's okay.
Go for it, Monica. Why don't you go ahead? It's the ones that you were allocated, and then I'm sure Tim will be back. I'll send him a message as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So maybe just for context for those that don't know me, up until 11 weeks ago, I was actually in the private sector of the tourism industry. And so I have a little bit of and I have a husband that's also in the private sector of the tourism industry. So I have a little bit of a lens with regards to pricing. I think what we've definitely seen in the Western Cape product stable is that we've always had product that's been quite strong in terms of the domestic market, both in terms of their offerings as well as their pricing. And then, as Ilse will have demonstrated in the research that she's demonstrated around the season, the hotels that have suffered the most are those 5-star properties. And so we are seeing a lot more agility, a lot more fluidity in the pricing in product that was historically directed exclusively at the international tourist. They've pivoted quite a bit and they've packaged things. I know, as an example, the 12 Apostles Hotel just down the road here is doing things like, movie night with popcorn for the family and so forth. So that's where the fluidity is in the pricing. But there is, of course, the sector of the tourism product offering that's always been very strong in the domestic market, and where I would say that probably the pricing has been quite appropriate historically. So that I would say from a pricing perspective, that's the story from where I'm seeing it. I also just want to add to the question with regards to, from the honourable member, with regards to the small towns, with regards to the events. So the Westgrow team, this leisure tourism team, as well as the corporate events team, work very closely with the RTOs and the LTOs. And every year we receive almost 200 submissions for event support. And we go through those and link them to our various forms of tourism that we promote. And we do support a great number of those almost 200 bid requests with event support into specifically the small Dorpies and local towns. So that process is concluded for this financial year, but there is an annual process, and we do encourage everybody through their RTO to apply for that. Cross-border tourism was the other one, Rashid, that you asked me to speak about, which essentially, so there's two things that I want to talk about here. The first is that because of how Wesgro is so uniquely constituted, because we have an investment promotion team, we have an air access team, we have a leisure tourism team, we have a business events team, and we have an export and trade team, we have a film industry team. What we're actually looking at is we're looking at an integrated approach to how we unlock the potential on the continent. And of course, leisure tourism plays a role, business events plays a role, but most importantly also and critically is air access. There's a number of markets that from an airlift perspective at the moment are just inaccessible to us. So as an example, at the moment, there is no airlift between Angola and South Africa. So from a leisure tourism team, the market that we're focusing on as low-hanging fruit at the moment is Kenya, simply because there is airlift and because there is already a degree of traffic and a degree of leisure tourism coming into the Western Cape province from that market. Airbnb in the rural areas was the other one that I noted down, Honourable Chair. So what I think it's important to remember that the Airbnb partnership from Wesgro's side was really because of their platform and because of their connectivity and because of their reach. We wanted to tell the story on a platform that reached a significant amount of consumers. And that's really why we partnered with them in the first place. I don't want to speak on behalf of Airbnb, but I do know that Velma and the team at Airbnb have a very strong community outreach program. They've spent a lot of time bringing Airbnb into local communities and rural towns. They do very much educate potential hosts around what it would require in order for them to have a successful Airbnb asset, including connectivity and having local insight. And I know that the Airbnb portal does have not only does it give access to the hosts if you're booking a specific place, and you can ask the host any questions around what you can do and what you can see in that particular location. But they also do those tours that you describe, Honourable Chair, they actually do those for the Western Cape Province experiences too. So there is that sort of depth and breadth. We did take extra care on the long stay portal that we did with Airbnb. We did take extra care to make sure that the product that was showcased there was representative of the entire province and demonstrated that you can actually work remotely with a beautiful view of the winelands or with a beautiful view of the ocean or with a beautiful view of the mountains. So we did take extra care around that. I think those were the questions. And then Tim will have to take the one around the export missions because that I would not be able to answer that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Monica.
I'm sorry about...
Yeah, Tim's back. Tim, if you could just expand on the Airbnb and just deal with the virtual trade missions, including the rural farmers, please. That one would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. I had some issues with when they do cash movements at the Reserve Bank. It's not an ideal building when that happens. But I'm happy to just expand a bit on the Airbnb answer that Monica gave and then deal with the rural farmers. So there's two other things I would add to the Airbnb logic. The one is they have a huge global platform that they allow us to tap into, hence why they were prioritized as a first port of call in terms of the positioning for remote work. But secondly, as we've discussed with this committee before, and some of the members who've been on it for a while might remember, Airbnb has an extraordinary ability to kind of unearth new accommodation capacity in towns to support a kind of surge of tourism to that town. So it's very important that you have this kind of listing capacity around the small towns of the Western Cape, because what the experience around the world has shown is when a town hosts a festival that is, well beyond the accommodation capacity that it normally has, Airbnb has the potential to unlock accommodation that wouldn't normally be provided. So it is important, particularly for small towns, that they have what you might call the Airbnb option. And so that's why there's a strong kind of rural logic for the platform. But as Monica said, we really saw that as just phase one with the the extension of the campaign going down into the smaller independent hotels and smaller accommodation groups. So it's really going to be comprehensive in the end, but with phase 1 launched with Airbnb. On the question of the farmers and export missions, firstly, last time we presented to the committee, the entire export mission program was virtual. And that continues to be successfully run. But we have now started doing physical missions again. We did one to Cameroon last week, and that was successful. So what we're seeing is a sort of blended model where we'll do many virtual missions and then some face-to-face, where it's important that we are in the market physically. I know we're scheduled to report back to the committee on the success of those missions. And to the chairperson, I'll make sure that we emphasize the areas where smaller farmers and players in the agricultural space have joined those missions, and also our plans to make sure that we build on that experience and improve the breadth of the impact of export missions across the agricultural space. Thanks, Rashid.
Thank you, Tim and Ilse. Will you handle the other ones? Yeah, there was a number there. I'll take them off as you go through it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson and honourable members. I'm just going to go in order. Member van der Westhuizen, with regards to the repatriation effort. So that was very much our response when we were in lockdown level 5 as a country. I think the world was still trying to figure out what do we do. And I do think South Africa is ahead of the curve in terms of our response. We have never ever gone back to our hard lockdown. There's various other countries like the UK that have had a third lockdown, and South Africa has actually adapted much better. We even went into the where we had a red list of countries to ban, and to see that that didn't work, moving more towards an effort of having a PCR test done on arrival and before you leave with regards to allowing people to enter. So currently, and the lobbying efforts we're doing with National in relation to this is extensive. We've throughout last year, we did an immense amount of work with national government in particular to propose and drive alternative approaches to not having a hard lockdown level. That is a very blunt tool to take with regards to recovery from just COVID for the economy as a whole, never mind tourism. So the repatriating efforts, I think we moved over 8,000 people out of the province last year, which was a massive effort, and to do so while people still had to be done with dignity, as well as just the logistics around that. So the lobbying efforts has definitely paid off in terms of that, in terms of policy decisions, just to do it as an alternative approach, specifically to the Command Council. And similarly, currently our big challenge with regards to that is the work we're doing in terms of events. And how do you open up events safely, specifically to the British Irish Lions tour, etc. So that's very much in terms of the work we've done with repatriating and looking at alternative approaches to PCR tests, and now the new work in terms of the vaccine rollout and having what would that look like. I know we're preparing a position statement for Minister Mania in terms of global best practice with regards to vaccine rollout and almost a what do we call it, like a health passport, etc. Then member just Maseko, just with regard, then what was the other question? Member Bosman, with regards to the municipalities. So we work quite closely in terms of there's a structure. So from DDAT's side, when we work in the districts, we work with what they call the Regional Tourism Organisation, the RTO forum, or that really sits, the RTO responsibility sits in the district municipalities. So where we've got municipalities where there's, and I say with a lot of love and respect, but there's lower levels of capacity with either from an LED perspective or a tourism perspective, we work with our districts quite closely, as well as your LTOs, which is a local tourism organisation, often sitting outside the municipality, and then of course the LED units within the different B municipalities. But there's definitely assistance we always provide, and we've got a structure with Wesco, the RTO forum, where we meet quarterly in terms of that. But again, we've set up WhatsApp group, Facebook groups, just to ensure there's communication. We meet with them at least as often as possible. They are welcome to contact myself, Ilse van Schalkwyk at westerncape.gov.za, or Jacques Stolz, our Director of Tourism, and then in Wesco, probably with Monica and Lana. So it's monica@westgrow.co.za and then lana@westgrow.co.za. I will also just provide that contact details directly to the chairperson if they would require any further assistance or information, etc. And then of course we try and also work strongly through the districts. That's quite key. Then in terms of Member Maseko, with regards to the cross-border travel, as Monica mentioned Kenya, but our priorities also going forward is with Kenya, Nigeria and Angola. Namibia is often seen as just an extension of South Africa with regards to the amount that they spend. And then just in terms of the vetting of the local municipal assets. So there's different approaches to that. There's the one that we've done in terms of the tourism blueprint strategy, where we did an assessment in each district in relation to their tourism products and what is the gaps with regards to their offering, so that we can ensure their sustainability in terms of the longer term attraction value. So the reason why people are visiting that municipal area in terms of their activities, attractions, experiences, etc. The infrastructure is an interesting question, and we looked at that from an event space in particular. Where there's existing infrastructure, why not use it for events, which is a key driver for domestic tourism in particular. So there's work that we're doing there with DCAS, as well as work we're doing in this financial year, we're busy with a Western Cape tourism infrastructure framework, because that's something we've seen as a gap, and it's an outcome of one of our levers in tourism blueprint, which really addresses how do we use our infrastructure, what do we need to invest in over the next 10 years to make sure that the tourism infrastructure is well maintained. There's budget for it from whichever level, and how do we leverage that? So that's definitely efforts. We've been approached by a lot of municipalities to look at alternative funding models. How do they run things differently? How do they use it? From a resort perspective, we're also working with National Department of Tourism. They're going to be investing into 7 key products in the province for a maintenance program. So infrastructure as a whole, we have to take a various pronged approach to make sure that it's accessible, it's at the right level, doesn't need maintenance, or if it does, what do we do, and where do we position it linking to tourism in terms of, is it for sporting, the form of tourism, is it for sporting, is it leisure, like what we've got with regards to some of our spas and caravan parks, etc., and what does that model look like? So there's a lot of efforts we're doing in terms of that space that we want to contain in the infrastructure framework. And then, sorry, I just want to make sure I've covered your questions. Then Chairperson Bartman, just to for your from your questions. So with regards to the remote working visa, we'll just email that through. In the press release, there's a link. So we've actually the minister's team included a link to where you are able to download the actual submission. So we'll just share that with you via email. And then just to mention some of the key what it's contained. So some of the key recommendations, it's proposed that the application criteria at a minimum. So if you apply, what is the minimum criteria, proof of, in terms of satisfying the minimum threshold, amount of income or savings on arrival, so that you've got money to be able to live and work in South Africa, proof of accommodation, where will you be staying, proof that the applicant's source of income lies outside South Africa, proof of travel and health insurance, as well as a proposal in terms of the short-term remote working visa. With regards to initially, we're proposing a 1-year period and then with an option to renew for another 2 years with checks and balances from DHA. And then ultimately, you propose certain amendments to the actual visa regulations, not the Act in itself, with regards to definitions, etc., that needs to change to enable us to allow people to have this type of visa. So that's just in a short, very 3 key points we're proposing when we did the regulatory analysis. Rashid, thank you very much. I think, then sorry, just the last one with regards to the tour guide, how do we promote the new system? So we ran a social media campaign. We also worked with the Tourist Guide Association, where Jock also presented with regards to what is the online system, how do you register, all the nuts and bolts of it. So working through the association. And then we've also created linkages with all the RTO and LTO in terms of our different ecosystem platforms on Facebook and WhatsApp, etc., just to send out information as and when it was launched. So the continued drive with regards to awareness is ongoing. Thank you very much. That's from my side.
Thank you, everybody. I think we've covered all the questions. Chairperson, back to you.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, I will now take follow-up questions as well as new questions. Member Maseko.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one.
And Maseko, I'm just going to see how many hands do we have. I see Member Vanderbilt. Okay, those two then, and then I'll go after that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It's just a quick one. I just want to find out, and I think I've asked before this question, if maybe there is something that I can refer to that the department has or the Westgrow. The LED within the municipalities, is there a way that you have a structured way of working with the municipalities in improving that? Or you haven't tapped into that to assist the municipalities, especially that you have the skills development allocation that you use? Is there any allocation that you have ever used in one of the municipalities? And how did the municipality, if there is one, how did it accept that, or did they give and I'm going to put in inverted commas, that is not their mandate or they are not responsible for that? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member van der Westhuizen, and then Member Nkondlo.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, two questions from my side. The first one is in terms of the tour guide registration. One of the requirements to become a tour guide is that you must have successfully completed a qualification from the relative CETA, CATH's CETA. And I do know that a number of years ago, the CETAs frustrated those learners considerably by the long delays in the issuing of certificates, etc. So in a sense, you're then in a catch-22. It doesn't help to have a nice system to register if you're not able to submit the necessary paperwork. And my question is to the officials, has that problem been resolved? What is the feedback that you are getting? And by the way, Chair, I must say, as we know, many of the tour guides have been working as freelancers, and I think we should save special thoughts for them because they've been extremely hard hit by the decline in the tourism, because it seems to me they're more reliant on international travelers than domestic travelers. The second question is regarding capacity. Should we again experience an upswing, as I think we all expect once inoculations and vaccines and so on have been rolled out? I do know that here in Stellenbosch, a number of guest houses, the two in my street block, have taken in students this year, which obviously is less profitable if you compare it to a good tourism year, but on the other hand, it allows them to survive. And my question is, do we have plans to at least preserve some of the capacity so that when an upswing should come, that we are ready for it, both in terms of restaurants? I believe that quite a number of them have closed down in a place like, for example, Franschhoek. Now, we do know that it is a seasonal thing as well, but I am concerned that we may be experiencing pressure on some of the activities and facilities once the industry recovers. Have you got any studies or any impressions that you believe we should contemplate, particularly to enable those entities to be able to reopen quickly should the time arrive? Thank you.
Thank you, Member Nkondlo. Member Nkondlo, we hear like as oh no, that's a different person. You must unmute, Member Nkondlo. Remember, your voice comes and goes. Is it possible to maybe walk to an area where there's a little bit better connectivity?
Okay, you can hear so?
We can hear you.
I can write. Am I audible? Yeah.
Yes, you are audible. Go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to follow up. I think I'm covered by Member Maseko on the questions of the integration of the work with the LEDs in the municipalities. I think one would want to understand whether the department or that is information that can only be sourced from the seat of who are the service in the Western Cape and assisting with the
Member Nkondo, sorry to interrupt you. Your voice and your signal, it comes and goes, and it kind of like sounds like a bit of a robot in the background. Let me just see quickly if I can mute everyone and then you unmute yourself. Okay, are you able to unmute yourself now quickly, Member Nkondo? Member, sorry to interrupt again. Your voice is coming through very, very badly. Is it possible for you to either text your questions in the chat box or to send them to me and then I read them out? Member Nkondo? Member Nkondo, are you still with us? Okay, Member Nkondo, if you are still with us, if you could perhaps put it into the chat box, or you can WhatsApp me or the procedural officer the questions and then we read it out to the officials, because your voice, it sounds like you're a robot walking around in the background there. Okay. With that, I only have two questions. Let me just see. It says here the chat box is disabled. Miss Adams, is the chat box disabled? Let me quickly test the chat box here. Test.
It's not disabled on my side.
Okay, it works on my side. So if Member Nkondo can maybe just type in there. I've put a test message there, so it's working. Okay. My two follow-ups in the meantime is I wanted to find out, Member van der Westhuizen has indicated, the possible problem with the CETAs. I know at Stellenbosch University and many other universities in the country what they do with the matric results, and also if you already got a degree there, they keep it on their system. And for example, your matric result automatically gets loaded up by Umlasi them and stuff, so that you don't need to send in your matric certificate yourself. It's already, your marks are already on the system. Is it not possible then to partner, if the tour guide registration is going to be online anyway, is it not possible to partner with CETA so that they automatically upload the qualifications and marks and things like that of the students to the system? Because then when someone applies, then you don't need to also then upload the certificate again. Perhaps if you can just indicate if that's a possible solution. And then regarding, I also have a concern regarding some of the restaurants closing down, but I'm in two minds about it, because some restaurants close down because they're making more money on the deliveries than what they're making in the store. And I've noticed with COVID, some of us, we are much happier to put on our PJs and put on our slippers and order a 4 or 5 star meal to our homes than actually go outside and go to the actual restaurant. And these days when we go outside, I take every opportunity to wear my heels and to put on some makeup because it feels like I'm going on an adventure. So is there a possibility of partnering with Mr. Delivery, Uber, and some of the other delivery apps? I don't know how many others there are, in order to then have a similar partnership that you currently have with Airbnb, but that then maximizes restaurants or businesses still being able to make profit and possibly even making more profit than they're currently doing, where they've already closed down, for example. And then I see here in the chat box, let me quickly read out. So from Member Nkondlo, she's asking, is there direct engagement and collaboration with LED units of municipalities? If so, which ones are active, and nature of those regarding tourism initiatives in those relevant municipalities? Okay. Mr. Tufi, I will revert to you for allocation of questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I will, Ilse, I'll ask you to answer the question on the LED support in the municipalities. And then Jacques, if you could just answer the questions, or the CETA specific questions, both from Member Bartman and Member Van der Westhuizen about how we can access that information. It's like we're having a lovely ideas session here rather than a question session, which is lovely. It's good to have that. And that includes, and then Ilse, could you and Tim, perhaps Ilse, you could start the kind of support that we could give to businesses that are struggling in terms of capacity, when inevitably there's an upswing. I agree with you, Chairperson, that some of those, what they call dark restaurants, where they're making money by simply not having a front end, but they're delivering, is still good business. But I know, Tim, you can add on the work we can do or are doing with restaurants to support them. So there was let me just answer the one question from Member Nkondlo. I just want to acknowledge that I think as non-members, we can't see the chat box. So a lot of my colleagues, we can't see what's in the chat box. So thank you for reading it out, Chairperson. In terms of direct engagements with municipalities, as you know, as DDAT, we have a municipal economic support unit, and we actually we've divvied up the province into individuals in our department who handle each district. And within those districts, we've met through COVID now. We meet often, at least once every month, if not more often, with the LED the LED members of each of those municipalities. So they've had very detailed presentations on our economic recovery plan. They've had feedback into that, and they then all are aware of all the local economic development support programs that we offer. So whether it's skills or the SME Booster Fund, which we launched last week, and then all of Ilse's tourism support programs. And so we've actually had quite a good spread of engagement of local economic development partners. But Ilse, you can also add to that final questions from Member Nkondlo if you've got specifics, especially because your background comes from being an LED member in Knysna. Perhaps you can give that perspective. So Ilse, over to you to just answer those questions, and then Jacques, and then Tim, if you could add, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashid.
Mr. Tofi, sorry for interrupting you, but before you guys answer, I got some more questions in the chat box, and I want to read them out just so that in case you're really going to be speaking to them, then it's not confusing. Okay. So the second question is, does DDAT have info about CETA accredited training providers that are active and providing tour guide training, including other related tourism training in the Western Cape? If so, can such information be shared? Next one is, are you aware of training challenges in the tourism sector and how DDAT has assisted in resolving those? And then the last one I see here is, can we be provided the list of Airbnbs and townships of the city and small rural towns and those that closed down during lockdown and have not recovered? Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, I think I've got them.
Ilse, you've got that, and maybe Tim, you could add about how possible it is to access that the Airbnb information. I know we have a good link into Airbnb. We could probably get that level of granular detail. Thank you. Thanks, Ilse.
Thank you, Rashid. Thank you, Chairperson. So I'll just go in order. With regards to Member Maseko, just to add to what Rashid mentioned, so we do engage with the LED units. The structure, as I mentioned earlier, is through the districts, to the RTO, linking to the LTO forum at a municipal level. But from an LED environment, the capacity isn't always consistent across the municipality and across there's different municipalities with it's also with regards to their staff capacity, because sometimes you'll find an LED unit that's responsible for LED, IDP and tourism. They don't always have the luxury specifically in the local municipalities. They mostly have an LED official. Very, very seldom in the province is there a tourism official, and they'll have to double down and do both. And they'll often work with their local tourism organization, like a Visit Neisner or a Plet Tourism, or where were we like in terms of some of the municipalities like Swellendam, they'll do the tourism function in-house. They won't even have an LTO. So that's one of the aspects we really want to address going forward as an outcome of Tourism Blueprint, in terms of the structure and the ecosystem of tourism within the province. And then, as Rashid mentioned, we work with Faye Darcy, who heads up our MES unit, because they've also got a structured approach towards the broader economic mandates in the province, never mind tourism, working with the municipalities. So there is a structure, it's which we work with, and the official one is through our RTO forums, working with the districts and then the local municipalities. Then just to mention that, let me just make sure I've covered that. Honourable van der Westhuizen, Jacques will be answering that question. And then just in terms of the capacity supply question you asked, so there is just not enough money in the country to keep all the businesses alive, unfortunately, with regards to relief aid. What we're seeing now is coming out, and what we are concerned about is the longer the recovery period and the impact of COVID lasts, the more the businesses suffer. What we've been engaging with a lot of businesses, and you would see that they are selling their fleet, they're selling their stocks, they're trying to pivot to actually just stay open. And it's one of the big levers of the National Tourism Recovery Plan is to protect supply. And we did an audit last year, and it's a constant request for information to keep track of which businesses are staying open, where, who's asking for help, and what are the tools in the toolbox to offer them in terms of help. Because a lot of for example, TERS had a big impact with regards to businesses just being able to pay their staff. And oftentimes the staff cost is the big chunk in terms of their cash flow. So the limited rollout, we don't know what's the future of TERS, is definitely going to have an impact on tourism, which is an industry which is just continuing to be impacted. And our approach is very much get businesses bums back into beds, get business to operate as quick as possible, so that they're not looking at government to sustain their businesses, because we just don't have the budget with regards to that. So in terms of the supply, we're trying to support them through efforts like our Tourism Product Development Fund, through the Booster Fund. There was probably, I think, I don't know, probably a third of the businesses that applied last year for the SME Relief Fund were tourism-related businesses. So trying to get them as much support as possible, and then working with them to try and get their businesses, just get the minimum turnover through our marketing efforts, just to get customers back. Hence why we need the domestic and the international campaigns to get tourists and visitors back into the Western Cape. That's quite key. And then just with regards to Member Mkhudlo, your questions. So as I said, we do engage directly with LED managers in the different municipalities and working through the districts when we have different initiatives. And it's, as I said, it's a varying response in terms of the province with regards to the capacity of those particular individuals, specifically with tourism, and then the nature of activities and what they're doing. There's a range of that. We could possibly, we do have a list of all the recovery plans, economic development recovery plans, which contains the details of what they're doing at a municipal level with regards to tourism. There's more than 30 of the municipalities, so the list is quite extensive, but we do have copies of that in terms of the work we're doing to pull that in, and we engage with them even with regards to Tourism Blueprint. Our next step is to develop the district action plans with regards to our tourism recovery, or our tourism plan for the next 10 years, so that there's key outcomes with regards to how we work, what we work, how do we pull the resources towards one direction to deliver on across the province. And then I'll ask Jacques just to answer the CETA training database, which we do have. In terms of the training challenges for the tour guides is, currently they're going through a stage where there's just not enough work for the tour guides. So the problem they've got now is in terms of their usual clientele, international visitors are just not here. So we've definitely seen a decline and drop in terms of the number of tourist guides that are registering for new guides. And the Western Cape, we've got over 5,000 registered tour guides in the province. So that's an extensive, we've got the most tour guides in the country as a province. So the challenge is how do we, the training gaps currently for us is definitely in terms of virtual. How do you run a virtual tour guide experience? What does that look like? Because a lot of them are sole proprietors. They're a one-man show, and they've had to pivot to just get an income. And we've tried to assist them as much as possible. And we've run workshops. Our current training initiatives is just with regards to health and safety. So when they do guide, what are the COVID protocols in terms of health and safety? What do they do? So there's different challenges. And I think the big thing that we have to invest in now going forward is definitely digital skills for tour guides as a mechanism, either through marketing their business as well as offering a different type of experience to get some income back into their businesses. And then just with regards to Chairperson Bartman, your questions, Jacques, I'll ask you just to deal with regards to the uploading of the qualifications. The CAT-CETA is, it's an ongoing problem. It's not something that's resolved easily with regards to the time they take. And then just to note that there's definitely been a shift you mentioned with regards to the supply side concerns. And from a retail perspective, we've seen different shifts in consumer behavior. You are 100% spot on in terms of people are the spend is more from visiting a restaurant to cooking at home. So we've seen a shift in consumer spend to more towards easily doing activities at home. So that's either from a spend, from a shopping, as well as the restaurant experience. And there's definitely opportunities there from a tourism perspective, although they still want that in-country experience. And unfortunately, that the impact of COVID has already happened in terms of many restaurants closing down, but some of them have already, repurposed and opened up in terms of new opportunities. So that shift in terms of what supply will look like once we're in 2022, and we hopefully there's some semblance of normality, will be different to what we experience currently. And private sector is already responding innovatively in terms of their offering, and just the online shopping as well as dining platforms have really increased in the last 6 months in particular as the economy and the entrepreneurs respond. Thank you, Rashid. I think that's all from my side.
Thank you. So over to you, Tim, just to answer the few that was left for you to reply to. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, got it. Thank you, Rashid. So just 3 quick answers. The LED district unit relationship, I think, is one that will illuminate the question about what we do with LEDs. I can give a very high-level answer now, but I have briefed the team that is appearing before the committee on the 9th of June to make sure that we deal with it substantively there. So I hope that's accepted. But essentially, the district unit, which this committee knows well, is a relatively new unit formed at Westgrow that is dedicated to landing particularly investment exports in film across the hinterland of the province, so with an entirely non-metro mandate. And what they've found, aside from developing a really strong pipeline of deals in the regions, they've also found that one of the best ways of getting traction and developing that pipeline and bringing business to the rural municipalities is by kind of doing joint training with the LED managers and the economic leaders in the municipality. So there's lots of great examples where
Tim, your voice has disappeared right after where you spoke about the LED units, right after you spoke about the investments in film.
Okay, sorry. They found that they get traction by doing training with the teams on the ground, including the LED managers, to build their capacity to help the municipality attract investment, drive exports, and attract film projects. So I have asked the team to give a more substantive report back on their work with LEDs on the 9th of June. On the question of restaurants, look, it's one of those sectors that is actually incredibly resilient in the long term. What happens is crises like the one we're in have a big impact on the restaurant scene in the short term. We looked together with the Brentos Foundation at what happened in places like New York before and after 9/11, and places like New Orleans before and after Hurricane Katrina. And what was interesting is there was a massive short-term impact on the number of restaurants in those places after their respective crises. But today there are, for example, in New York, going into COVID, there were 26,000 restaurants, when before 9/11 there were 20,000. So there is a big bounce back impact. Again, in New Orleans before Katrina, there were 1,000 restaurants, and today there's 1,300 going into COVID. So I think we do anticipate the same thing. It doesn't mean that there aren't real stories of desperation and crisis at the individual level and at the restaurant level. To try and mitigate that, hopefully some of the members joined the webinar that we did in September last year, where we released a document called the Western Cape Guide to Global Best Practice for Tourism, Restaurants and Hospitality Industries. We did that with the mayor of Stellenbosch, because one of the examples we profiled was the SnapScan project that they did with Visit Stellenbosch, and that successfully kept spending up across the restaurants in Stellenbosch and helped many of them to survive. We profiled that as an example of best practice, along with other things that cities and municipalities were doing around the world. And we shared it with all of the mayors in the Western Cape, hoping that they can emulate some of those ideas and use some of the capabilities municipalities have to help restaurants deal with the crisis. We also set up a follow-up call between the MEC and Visit Stellenbosch to understand the kind of economics of that SnapScan model and whether it could be emulated if we do go into another heavy lockdown. So I think it's definitely a live point and something that the full tourism team is looking at in a kind of comprehensive way. In terms of the Airbnb request, I've asked the tourism team to write to Velma and the team and see if we can get that data and get them to send it to the committee. Thanks a lot, Rashid.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much. And then lastly, Jacques, if you could be the sweeper and pick up those last questions about CATSETA and the training. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Honourable Bartman and Honourable van der Westhuizen. So the situation at CATSETA has certainly been of concern to us. During lockdown last year, there were a number of delays in the CETA issuing certificates, which then affected our ability to issue tourist guide permits. Since January, they have started issuing certificates again, but there are still delays. We are engaging CATSETA and the National Department of Tourism, and I know that another meeting has been scheduled for next Monday where this matter will be discussed. I should also mention that previously DDAT could access the CATSETA system online to verify the status of learners, but at present their system is not accessible, so we are engaging them on rectifying this problem as well. And so in theory, it is possible for us to access the system directly through the CATSETA system. It's just that since last year, there's been a technical challenge around this. And then lastly, just to also mention that we do receive regular lists of CATSETA accredited training providers, and we have a list available of Western Cape providers. Thank you, Rashid.
Thank you, Tim. I think we've covered all the questions. Honourable Chair, back to you.
Thank you. I'm going to take any follow-up questions as we do have some time. I would like to then just ask that we just keep our questions short. Are there any hands? Okay, I will then go. Regarding the CETA, since Jacques has now indicated that you guys are meeting with them on Monday, my question then is, we are going to have a briefing on the 9th of June regarding skills. Could you then please make sure that after you've met with them and that by the meeting on the 9th of June, that we please then either in that meeting or before that meeting, please get a report back, because I cannot understand how previously one could access the system to verify, and now because of administration and online, these systems aren't working. It doesn't make sense. We have a whole government with lots of IT people. They need to do their job. That is it. That is the first one. And then my second question is, recently I was at a farm, like little B&B, chalet, hotel, not exactly sure which one it is, but it was a farm rural area in the Ladysmith area. And one of the comments that the owner made regarding payments with tourism and at the restaurant and things like that is she has now gotten the Yoko system, because the previous payment systems were completely horrible, and she would be walking around the farm to look for signal and things like that. And you also spoke about the SnapScan that people are using for easier payments. And I don't know what the technical wording is for those particular systems. I only know some of the brand names like Yoko and SnapScan. But do you support these type of products for making easy payments in especially the rural areas? And if so, are there any partnerships with them? Are there any education on these type of systems within the tourism sector in the rural areas for people to make payments easier, so that people and owners and entrepreneurs aren't walking around the farms looking for signal and walking around the townships looking for signal and things like that? I see Member Maseko's hand is up. Member Maseko, you may go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a quick one. I'm going back to the municipalities. That's my passion. I'm sorry for today. The towns, the small towns like your Langeberg, Robertson, used to, I don't know if they're still doing that, used to sell themselves in tourism overseas. I think it's Netherlands or Germany. I think it's Netherlands. So they will promote tourism directly to Netherlands, and they were getting the visitors directly in that way. A person will say, I'm going to Robertson. Do we have other towns in the Western Cape that are doing the same thing? The municipalities that do have the towns that they sort of promote tourism overseas in that systems, or it was only the Robertson? And if there is the towns that are doing that, can we get the list or maybe the indication of where are those towns and which overseas countries are they selling themselves? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Member Maseko. And I would like to implore you to never apologize for having a passion for small towns. If not you, then who? Mr. Tufi, please allocate. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, I note your question about the CETA, so we will. I think it's a good idea when we return on the 9th. Let's give you a comprehensive update. I can tell you that it's a dysfunctional CETA, frankly. You remember it's also in your mandate to call them to that meeting. So if you feel like we've done previously with other home affairs and things, if you feel like you would like to invite them to come and present and answer, feel free to do so if you wish. On the easy payment matter, Tim, if you could just speak to that, if they're partnerships. I know we have good relationships with Yoko. We're proud of such local partners. Maybe if you or your team members could see if we, again, these are all just good ideas rather than questions coming up. And then Member Nkondlo's issue about the towns and the twinning. I'm actually not too sure which of the colleagues would like to handle that. Perhaps Ilse, if you could start, and maybe Monica can add on that. But again, a good point to try and get you that list of information. So so Tim, over to you first. Yeah.
Yeah, very happy to take that one. So what I suggest, Chairperson, is that the committee considers actually inviting Yoko and SnapScan and some of the other kind of payment players in the Western Cape to actually present to the committee. They've got really exciting stories of not only their personal company growth, but the businesses that they've helped to facilitate. Obviously, Yoko does make it much easier for small vendors to accept payments, and we've worked with them for a long time. I remember telling the committee previously the story of how the founder of Yoko actually moved from Joburg because he thought Cape Town was a better place to grow a business like this. So Yoko itself is a real kind of investment success story, but I think the committee can kind of unpack with them the impact that they have, particularly in small businesses around the province. SnapScan was the particular collaboration for Visit Stellenbosch because it allowed them to kind of manage the credit side of the spending plan. So what would happen is you would spend money at a restaurant and it would generate additional credits on SnapScan that then you could spend at your next restaurant visit. So it's really just the technology helping to keep money flowing through the town and keeps people spending money at restaurants in a time when they really needed that patronage. So they also have excellent stories of assisting small businesses, and this particular example I think is a good one that we're encouraging other towns and LTOs to look at ahead of potential lockdown that impacts restaurants again. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And Chairperson, through our digital unit, we've previously had a webinar with both Yoko and SnapScan, so please reach out to me and we can arrange a meeting, either a separate presentation by them or invite them to one of your sessions. Ilse, can I ask you just to talk about the matter of the smaller municipalities and their direct marketing and how we can support them?
Thanks, Rashid. So in terms of that, there's two different approaches. So some municipalities, one, they've got what you call a twinning agreement, and there's a long list. We can try and see if we've got that, but the individual municipalities will then twin with a different town internationally, and then they will have different, from a trade perspective, from an LED infrastructure, there's different ways that they engage with them. But from a marketing perspective, what we see currently as being difficult, even in the Western Cape, where we prioritize specific different countries that from a source market perspective as a Western Cape, and then there'll also be certain areas where they'll prefer to travel even within the province if you want to take it down to a regional level, that there's existing data in relation to that. But the current difficulty in terms of that is, of course, the international travel bans that the different countries have against or with South Africa. So where they would ban travel, like what we're currently seeing in terms of the Netherlands, the UK, etc., and the list goes on and on and on. And that really hampers our ability to make good in terms of pushing for allowing visitors back into the country and promoting travel between the destinations. So that's unfortunate as it is. But what we do have, which was actually just to show a little bit of a better profile, is the source markets in every continent with regards to what we want to prioritize going forward in terms of the Western Cape. For each continent, in terms of where there's access, when they come, what do they look for, etc. So there is method behind the madness with regards to our source markets and where do they come to into the terms of the province and what we have on offer. Thank you.
Chairperson, that's all those questions answered. Back to you.
Thank you so much. And I'll ask the members in the resolution stage if we can have some briefings on some of the recommendations. I see there is a last question in the chat box. It's from Member Maseko, and she asks if there are any towns outside Cape Town where the promotion of the Kasi economy is being championed. I do think we are now going into the more economic development sphere rather than just tourism. But Mr. Tufi, I'm sure that as acting HOD, you can quickly on your feet assist Member Maseko with this query.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm just thinking of the one, just trying to think of an example, the one in Montague with the tourism development project, which works with the local township. Could you give us that example? Or if you have any others, I would appreciate it.
Sure, not a problem, Rashid. So Member Maseko, that's really where we're working with a company called Flying Feet, where we're doing particular cycle type of township tours. They were one of our beneficiaries, where we wanted to promote township experiences as well as guided tours on bicycles throughout that area. In terms of just promoting that activity and putting money back into the pockets of those businesses. So that's definitely one of the good examples which we've got. Other examples is gosh, we do film activity in the garden route, which also we did film activity training with Occupancy Media, very, very good name. So there's work that we're doing there. There's also work we're doing, we've done it 2 years in a row with our event forum to do training for events. That includes township events in terms of how do I run an event, how do I do that's more of a skills development effort with regards to businesses, SMMEs, in terms of events that they actually showcase. So that's just been a little bit of hard hit post-COVID because of the capacity changes in terms of the regulations. But there's work that we're doing with them in terms of that, as well as, and unfortunately, with a lot of our tour guide training opportunities, a lot of that is also for previously disadvantaged individuals. And it's unfortunate that they've also been hard hit with regards to getting their businesses to access tour guide opportunities. But that's another initiative that we're doing with regards to SMME development in the Western Cape. And there's a range of others that we do, but those are some of the first ones that's just top of mind. Thank you.
Ilse, thank you. And perhaps you could share some of the work that our sister organization, Cape Town Tourism, not sister, but the municipal work, the work that Cape Town Tourism does in the Occupancy space. Maybe that's useful as well, because they have a mandate that covers that. And they do that in the townships of the predominantly of the CBD, but there are Occupancy projects, yeah?
Yes, that's definitely, for example, the routes like the Langa, they're looking at tourism routes, because it's not, there's got to be an attraction value. So the Cape Town, because it's very much more a municipal mandate, so the City of Cape Town has mandated Cape Town Tourism to roll out that function. So we sit on those boards to try, or not those boards, those workshops to assist them in terms of their planning and whatever other resources we can do that. So we can always share that or ask them to come and present some of the good work that they're doing on a municipal space.
Okay, fantastic. And Monica, I saw you wanted to add, or did you feel you covered?
I'd love to actually still add something very much, and thanks, Rashid. I wanted to just go back to the initial first point that Ilse was speaking about with regards to towns promoting themselves to the international markets. I'm in full support, obviously, at the moment. The international tourism space is quite a depressed one and therefore not really topical. But I wanted to just let the honourable members on the honourable chair know that we are actually planning a winter school together with DDAT in the Cape Karoo in this winter, where we're going to invite the RTOs and the LTOs to attend a 2-day workshop, which we're theming the Great Reset. And so we're going to be training the districts and the local towns in terms of what the new global consumer mindset is with regards to transformative travel, travel to do good, essentially. And we're going to be training them a little bit around what the new social media and the new digital landscape looks like. And we're going to be encouraging them to package and to think about how they can take the local experiences in their district or in their town and how they can package those together so that they become attractive to the international market when that market resumes. So we're quite excited about that. Thank you.
Brilliant, Monica. Perfect. Thank you for adding that. Back to you, Chair.
Oh, Monica, you waited 2 hours to tell us about this wonderful initiative. Oh, guys.
Well,
please
if
keep us
protocol,
up to date.
Honourable Chair, if protocol permits, we would love to have you there because it's going to be in Maatjiesfontein.
No, you must invite us. Maatjiesfontein is in my constituency. You must invite us. And you must get John to do the 1-minute tour, the shortest tour in the country, and the cricket field where the first international cricket game was played. And then he must show you the Lord Milner's ghost. And then he must get you into the pub where you sing nice songs on the piano. And I've kind of promised him possibly that I must still go join him with the accordion playing songs. No, you must invite us.
You're most welcome.
Okay.
We will do so.
Okay.
I think we have someone to open that event and host it. So Member Bartman, I hope you have 2 days spare in June.
No, we will make a plan. We will make a plan. Okay. Colleagues, with that, thank you so much. I would first like to thank the officials, both from the department and from Wesgro. And I just wanted to say a special note Thank you to the CEO of Wesgro, Mr. Tim Harris. He is leaving the public sector to the private sector where there's real money. And we would just like to wish him the best in his success and endeavors in the private sector. And please don't forget about government and about the public sector and the little people in South Africa. But thank you so much for your contribution over the years and for everything you've done. There's so many innovative programs that have occurred at Wesgro over the years under your leadership, and we thank you for what you have done over the years.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you for the wishes from you and the committee. Yeah, it's been a really rewarding 6 and a bit years, and I'm sure the committee knows Wesgro's 40 years old this year. So it's a very long story, Wesgro's contribution to the Western Cape, and I feel privileged to have played a very small part in that. And thank you for your support and the committee's support over the years.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, with that, the department officials in Wesgro, you are welcome to leave us now should you wish. It is an open meeting should you wish to remain for the feedback and the resolution stage, but you are welcome to go on with your day-to-day duties accordingly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Perfect. Bye-bye. Colleagues, I just need to give some feedback that I have on my list to give to the committee, and then we're going to move on to the resolution stage. I've already reminded members of the, the UIF questions that needs to be approved. So please, members, the UIF questions, we need them approved so that we are able to put the advert together. So if members can please via email approve those to the procedural officer. By the end of 12 o'clock, which is the end of this committee meeting is scheduled for, that would be appreciated. The next feedback is we received a letter in terms from Minister Meyer to recommend to go and have an oversight at the Transnet Ports Authority regarding port inefficiencies, specifically regarding the Citrus Growers Association and their concerns. Due to the urgency of the matter, I requested an oversight date from the programming committee. That original date was the 1st of June. And unfortunately, Transnet asked if we can just move our date, but they are happy to meet with us. And I received that letter from Minister Gordon's office that we can go to the TNPA, to the City of Cape Town Port. And the aim of the briefing and the oversight is not only to hear the concerns that the Citrus Growers Association would like to raise with us, but because we had a previous resolution to go and do oversight at the City of Cape Town Port, that we keep the TNPA and DDAT presentations general so that they can tell us about the other industries as well, because we might after that also want to hear from other big umbrella associations that have port inefficiencies. For example, the construction industry, I know have had previous port inefficiency problems that they have had concerns regarding. So this particular oversight, we've identified the 23rd of June for the briefing and oversight. So if you can please just check the program for that will be coming up. We don't have any clashes with other committees, so we are able to schedule that then for the 23rd of June. The next one is, now that the 1st of June is open and nothing has been scheduled for that today, the National Assembly and National Council of Provinces, the Tourism Committee, has invited us to a committee of tourism where they will have the banking industry before them to discuss matters related to the tourism industry. And I've asked that the procedural officer forward that invitation to all committee members should they wish to join. I will be joining online as well, and I would like to urge everyone else to also join online, as I do think it will be quite an interesting meeting. The procedural officer is alerting me that for the 23rd of June, if members could please just indicate their preference for transport to the port, because we will be traveling to the Transnet port on that day. So we can just indicate to Ms. Adams our preferences. Our slot for the 9th of June also stems from previous committee resolutions. We will be hearing about skills and BPO skills and the BPO Academy from the different DDAT department and respective entities about the skills training that they do and offer and present. So that is the 9 June briefing based on previous resolutions. And I do think that we should attempt to get CETA involved in that meeting. If not, then perhaps we should have a separate meeting regarding the CETAs. So before I go on, would it be okay with members that we then also invite the CETA that they've been having problems with to brief us on this particular CETA or general CETAs? And if they are not able to join us on 9th of June, for us then to attempt to identify a date in order to have a briefing regarding CETAs and the training that is being given within the Western Cape. Would that be suitable for members, appropriate? Member van der Westhuizen?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. As you will recall, I raised this issue in the meeting just now, and it was then confirmed by the officials that there are various problems, not only with the issuing of certificates, but also with the access to the database of qualifications, etc. I think if we could also perhaps identify some training providers because to come and brief us, because the training providers are often the ones with the egg on their faces. They took some money, they offered the training, and then eventually the candidates are not issued with the qualifications. So I would fully support that. Thank you.
Okay. If we're going to be inviting training providers as well, I would like us to send out a general invitation instead of identifying specific training providers in case we miss one or another. And I do not wish to offend anyone within the tourism and CETA industry in that manner. My advice then is that we go and identify a separate date to have CETA before us, and then to also ask DDAT for a stakeholder list if they are not already part of the list that we currently have, and that we then ask them to also invite the training providers, and that we will then allow them to also give their input regarding how they view the impact of the CETA and the training. But that is my advice then regarding this recommendation. Would that be in order, members?
Agreed, Chair, and it obviously goes a lot wider than just tourism. It has a severe impact on economic growth and people's ability to find employment.
Okay, perfect. So what we'll do is we will ask them that it is a separate date, that it's CETA, the skills and training in general and stuff like that, and that we also ask DDAT then for the stakeholder list so that we can ask them to either send it on to training providers or that they give us the list so that the procedural officer can invite the training providers should they wish to also indicate their views. Okay, so that is that then for those meetings. Regarding Petro SA, we still need to reschedule an oversight to Petro SA. So if it's in order with members, can we please ask that I, together with the procedural officer, schedule an oversight to Petro SA in Mossel Bay, because we do know that the employees, there have been multiple reports that for the past 6 months, not only have they really been operating, we have now a gas entity that produces no gas, and the employees, I do know, are not being paid at the moment, but they are still on the payroll. Members, would it be in order for us to reschedule the Petro SA oversight, because previously they cancelled on us a few days beforehand?
That is in order, Chair.
Thank you, Member Maseko. Okay. Currently, those are all the matters for feedback that I have. And then there was one recommendation from the department that we invite SnapScan and Yoko to the committee to brief us on the various payment systems. I don't know whether there are other companies that also operate in this space, but I think if we can get the correct terminology, if the procedural officer can get us the correct terminology from the department, that perhaps we should have a briefing on that type of payment service providers before the committee and how they assist businesses and entrepreneurs with easy payments systems, because I don't specifically just want to invite Yoko or Snapscan. I think there might be one or two others that are also in the sphere. And with the support of the committee, would we be able to please schedule a briefing on this matter?
Agreed.
Thank you so much. Okay, so with that, we will find out what the technical wording is for that, and then we will find a date for a briefing regarding this matter. I do not have anything else of feedback. Are there any other resolutions from members? Going once, going twice, sold. Okay. Members, with that, Member Maseko, you may go ahead.
Chair, okay, Chair, I just want to find out, are you still going to talk about the questions of the UIF? I still
Yes,
want to
members.
address that. Okay.
Yes, members. So I've indicated that Zaida, Ms. Adams has forwarded to you. Let me just quickly open that up. She's forwarded last week, and we're just reminding members to, via email, to go and approve them. You are welcome to approve them in committee if you would like to do so now, but let me just quickly open this email. Okay. So based on the previous questions sent in by members, they have cleaned up our questions just so that there are no leading questions and that they are just phrased correctly. But let me quickly go through them, and then you can indicate to me whether you are happy with the way it is phrased. The first one, sorry, let me also open the document quickly. Ms. Adams, do you have the document in front of you? Because then I can just read it on the screen for members.
I'll just open it and then I can flight it.
Okay, let's flight it quickly because then I can just read it on the screen for members, yes. And then members don't need to necessarily approve by email. They can always approve now in the committee as well.
Chair, I see it was sent on Friday to members.
Yes, we're just waiting quickly for Ms. Adams to flight it, just so that because there is still time until 12 o'clock. Okay, let's see here quickly. Okay, so members, based on the questions that were put forward, Member van der Western, and I'll take your hand now. I just want to quickly go through the questions. So the first one is, are you an employer or an employee based in the Western Cape? So then there would be 3 blocks. You would click an employer, an employee, or other. If it's other, there would be a drop-down box that opens up and you would have to say, what do you mean by other? So for example, if I'm applying for my dad and I'm saying my dad can't use the internet and I'm applying for my dad, I'm just making a random example now, then you can type in there, this is who I am and this is why I'm completing this questionnaire. Okay. The second question, let me first go through all the questions, then I can come back. Second question is, have you, as a Western Cape employer, employee, and or your employer submitted a COVID-19 TERS claim to the UIF? Now, the reason for cleaning up the question in that manner is so that if you are the one who submitted it on your own behalf or your employee's behalf, or sometimes you, an employee, want to speak about the application that your employer made, okay? So then you would have to tick yes or no, whether you are one of those categories. If you click no, the user will obviously be asked to elaborate. And then further, you must then provide, if it's not a UIF matter, you would then have to write in your name, your ID number, your date, the date of the application, so the location where the claim was made, and the reference number for the claim. The rest of the questions will then fall away if it's a non-COVID TERS related matter. And then the contact details automatically will be provided where claimants can send the information to. But there will also be a drop-down box where if people then, found this link and wanted to enter the details of the non-COVID TERS related matter, this we will then as a committee escalate to the UIF separately. Okay, let's quickly go to question number 3. I will come back for questions and for approval on various questions now. Now I just want to go to to all of them so that we can see how they are related. Ms. Adams, if you can just go down a little bit so that we can see the dot. Yeah, there we go. Okay. How many COVID-19 TERS applications have you as Western Cape employee and or your employer submitted to the UIF? So then you would have to write in the number that you submitted there. Okay. Then the next question, have you experienced any challenges applying for the COVID-19 TERS funding or with the payout of the approved funds? Then you click yes or you click no. And if you say yes, then you must write down what were the challenges that you experienced, okay? Number 5, if your claim has not been resolved, please provide the following information, which will be escalated to the UIF. And this is also based on the recommendations by the UIF of information that they need in order to resolve a matter: name, ID, where you apply, date of application, reference number. Question 6. Were there any delays in receiving your approved COVID-19 TERS payout? Yes or no? And if you clicked yes, then you must indicate the time delays in terms of working days. Because it also doesn't help we complain to the UIF, we must tell them exactly what the details are. Number 7, if you received a COVID-19 TERS payout, how many employees were applied for and how many received their payouts? And then you would type in the number of employees applied for and the number of employees that received their payout, because the one is not necessarily the same as the other. Okay. And if you, for example, are doing it for yourself, you would type in, for example, 1. And if you weren't paid out, you would type in 0. Okay. Number 8, have you received any response, example, remittance advice from the UIF indicating the amount of employees that have been successful in receiving the COVID-19 TERS payout? Yes or no? That's an easy one. Number 9, have you received any guidance from the UIF on the COVID-19 TERS application process? Yes or no? And how did you become aware of the COVID-19 TERS funding? And there someone would type in, for example, social media or local municipality or online emails and stuff like that. So those are essentially the questions based on the previous resolutions from members in committee, as well as the questions received before the deadline date. Members, I'll go back up to number 1. Member Vanderbilt says, and I did see your hand earlier. You can go first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question is, or questions or remarks start actually with question number 3. I don't know if there are any others who would like to go before me.
Okay, let me quickly ask, does anyone have questions regarding question 1 or 2? If none, let's go to question 3. Member van der Westhuizen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. How many TERS applications have you as an employee and or your employer submitted to the UIF? Initially, I wasn't sure whether this is referring to the number of submissions or the number of employees that people applied for. Now, the employees one is covered later on. So I was just wondering whether if we say number of applications submitted, whether, you know, I initially was a little bit uncertain what was meant, because, you know, number of applications submitted, I thought it could be if you submit, you know, once, but you apply for 2 people, if I could call that. And I'm just wondering whether we, number of applications submitted, whether we shouldn't just say number of submissions for TERS funding, something to that effect. Just a slight rewording.
Okay, let's edit applications then to submissions. And can we perhaps then put in brackets after the question? We can just maybe put an asterisk or something saying this does not refer to the amount of employees for the application, something like that.
Correct, not the number of employees, yes.
Don't say amount of employees, say number of employees. Number of employees applied for. Yeah, applied for. Okay. Perfect. Members, are you happy with number 3? Okay, if no objections. Number 4, any questions? Okay, number 5.
Under number 5, Chair, if I may come in.
Yes, you may.
If your claim has not been resolved, I was wondering whether we shouldn't just say it's not been paid out as expected, or if your claim has not been honored, or if your payout has not been in line with what you expected to receive. Resolved is perhaps a little bit too wide a word.
Well, resolved and completed, and those words are all really similes. But Member van der Westhuizen, I would ask that we don't put that one in there, because we already have a question to ask if the claim has been resolved and what the details are. Let me just quickly see. Yes, in the beginning, I think it was in the beginning that we had about that. Let me just quickly see. Yeah, it's if your claim has not been resolved, please provide the following information, which will escalate it to the UIF. So in the question itself, it speaks about not being resolved, because then the next question is, were there any delays in receiving your approved payout? And if you've received it, how many employees that you receive it for? So this section 5 is because if your claim has been resolved, it is unlikely that someone is going to say, committee, please help me with this matter. They might indicate, for example, that they had delays and they just want to make an input, and then the previous 1 and 2 drop-down boxes will come in and they'll be able to type in those. But because the question is already phrased to say not been resolved, I do think that will probably be sufficient. This particular information we got from the UIF, that they said this is the information they need in order to resolve a claim. Would that be sufficient for you, Member van der Westhuizen?
Chair, I don't like the word resolved at all. If I have an accident with my car and I submit a claim, it's not resolved. The claim is either settled or the claim is, not settled or something like that. The word resolved just doesn't go down. And I think that, people submitted claims with certain expectation. They understood something, that, something would pay. But if I have an accident with my car and I claim and the damage is 20,000 Rand, I'll probably get 18,000 Rand, because that's the rules of the game. I don't get the full 20,000. So I just would like us to be a little bit more specific in that regard. The word resolved and claims, in my mind, they're not that they don't go together that well. So if your claim has been settled, then perhaps, or settled in full, something to that effect, I think we could just, or if you still have, challenges with your claim, something to that effect, please provide the following information.
Okay. I do know that in the legal sphere, we use claim and resolved quite frequently, and I've quickly Googled the meaning of resolved, and it says here it means to settle or to find a solution to. And that's settle and resolve essentially means the same thing in terms of the similar wording. So I don't think there's a difference. If you want to put the word settle, we can put the word settle, because in order to settle a claim that has not been resolved or settled, one would still have to put the respective details to escalate it to the UIF in order for them to resolve or to settle the matter that the person is talking about. So if our procedure officer can then just use the word settle then in terms of instead of resolved. Okay. Everyone happy?
Thank you, Chair.
No problem. Perfect. Number 6, were there any delays in receiving your approved co-workers funding? Any questions there?
Please, Chair.
Yes, Member van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say what constitutes a delay? Is it 2 weeks, a month? I think people may have quite different expectations, and I'm just wondering whether I don't know whether there were any promises of how soon the money would be paid, but if you say, were there any delays, some people could find one day as a delay, and others would accept that, a month is not yet a delay. It's a normal kind of time lapse that one can expect. So I was just wondering whether we shouldn't say, not only delays, but how long did it take for you to have a response or for your claim to be settled? But just were there any delays, I think is too open-ended.
Okay, the UIF previously confirmed with us that they take 5 working days max. So a day delay would be a day later, but we can rephrase the question to ask how many days did it take in order for your approved COVID-19 TERS funding to be paid out.
Thank you, Chief.
And then in brackets, we can just say then that the funds are usually paid out within 5 working days, according to the UIF. So and just, don't say money, say funding. Okay, and then just in brackets. Of working days. No, not days, working days. For payment is 5 days. According to the UIF. Okay, and then just the T must be a capital. Okay, perfect. Okay, members, if you're happy, can we go to number 7? So there by number 7, you would have to indicate how many employees you applied for. So if you applied for 10, you would type 10. And how many have received their payouts, you would type, for example, 9 or 10 or 0. Okay. Just type there, please indicate the number of working days there by number 6. Yeah, please indicate the number of working days. Okay. Number 7, any questions? None. Number 8.
Chair?
Yes. Member
Just,
Vanderbilt.
just a suggestion, have you received any response, i.e. remittance advice, or perhaps you could say advices, from the UIF indicating which employees have been successful in indicating the COVID TERS payout? Because I think the problem was in reconciling that, who qualified, who did not qualify, because employers had to allocate that money to various employees in order to, pay it to them. So I think if you know which, then you will also know the amount or the number. Yeah. Sorry, not the amount, the number of employees.
No problem, that edit can be included. Number 9, have you received any guidance? So this is, for example, if the UIF has spoken to you. Okay, no objections. Number 10, how did you become aware of the funding? That is just for people to indicate extra information to us.
Chair?
Elaborate in that box. Member van der Westhuizen?
Yeah, sorry, to go back to number 8, thank you for changing that from the UIF indicating which employees. Can I just say have been approved for the COVID-19 TERS payout? Can I just say, I think part of the miscommunication was also that at one stage employers were paid in terms of the claims to which they submitted on behalf of employees. And in other cases, employees apparently were paid directly, which also caused problems for employers to allocate the money and to reconcile and to know who they owe money to, etc. If that was indeed the problem, can we either rephrase or just ensure that that aspect is also covered?
Okay, members, if you would remember in question 1, 2, and I think 3, we've indicated that you apply as an employee, as an employer, or other, or are you making a submission and your employer applied for you? So you would already have indicated in the application in what context you are submitting information to us. I don't think it's then necessary when we're asking about have you received responses and guidance and how do you become aware to also include that, because you would have already ticked employer, employee, other. You would have written what is other, and in the respective initial questions, it was drafted in a way that either the employee applied, the employer applied, or the employee is telling us about an application the employer made on their behalf, and they would like to make a submission in that respect to us. Because, for example, I do know that there are some employers who made an application, but the employees never got the money. So that employee might want to make a submission to say that they are still waiting for that particular money. I do not think it's necessary for us to also now in questions 8, 9, and 10 to also put that, because that would be straightforward questions to ask. Did you receive remittance advice? If someone did not receive a remittance advice, for example, it would be no. If you have not received guidance from the UIF on the process, the answer would be no. If you became aware of the COVID-19 TERS funding because you're an employee or you got it via social media and so on, you would write social media, you would write Facebook, you would write Deirdre told me, word of mouth, for example. So I do think these are a bit more straightforward questions. We could possibly change receiving to approved or something like that. But yeah, I think we've covered the other ones in the previous questions. Have you received any response from those who have been approved for the TERS payout? Okay. Would approved work better for members? Member van der Westhuizen, would approve work better?
Where do you want to say approve? Under 8.
Yes, under 8.
Have been approved. Yes, I think that would cover one part of it. But Chair, my problem is still, employers are being accused of, I almost want to say, not transferring the money to employees, money that were entitled to the employees. But if I submitted on behalf of employees, and some of the money was paid to me as employer and some of the money was paid directly to employees, shouldn't we then have a question to say, and did your remittance advice indicate whether the money would be paid to you or to the employee? You understand? My understanding is that is where some employers are now being accused, or they stand to be accused, and they feel that they are at loggerheads. They don't know. They just received an amount. It was not the amount they claimed. They don't know, which people they must pay the money to, and which have already received the money, and now they must actually recover that money, which we all know might be very difficult. So whether I'm not about the employees that applied and eventually the employees got the money. It's about the employers that applied on behalf of and who are now finding themselves in the accused benches, but they according to them, they don't know. They're not able to make it work 100% as they're expected to do.
Okay.
And I don't know how that is covered. That potential problem of having claimed, having received some money. So then the remittance advice we must say that, and whether the remittance advice indicated, whether the money was included in the bulk payment to the employer. I hope we can find each other or be on the same sheet here.
Okay, members, I do think we're on the same sheet. If you remember correctly, in the beginning of COVID and the UIF, if you have been paid, you can go online and check every single company and every single employee on their website. I remember my constituency, when I was on the road, when I was walking in the streets and someone asked me about labor funding, I would quickly go on my phone and check whether the employer has already been receiving the funding, and I would be able to exactly tell them to the last cent how much that employer was paid out based on the information on the website. We must also remember this is a public hearing process. The questions of the public hearing process where you can enter the respective information. We must not assume that if someone is being accused that they are wrong or if they are correct, because in this process we can't also ask leading questions, which is why I asked that the officials assist us in cleaning up some of those questions, because otherwise some of our original questions would have qualified as leading questions. And a leading question, for example, would be like, don't you think this red apple is delicious? That is, for example, a leading question. Instead of asking, do you get apples? What is the color of the apple? How do you feel about the apple? And you would have to specifically indicate the apple is delicious. The other purpose of the public hearing also is if you get the information, the claim number, the ID number, then it is the job of the UIF to go check, did we pay out the people? If we did not pay out the people, why did we not pay out the people? Did we send the information to the people about whether or not they were paid out? So that is the job of the UIF in this whole public hearing process. And they need to hear what the people have to complain about. So the same way you would, for example, lodge a claim at the court or lodge a claim at the CCMA, you don't first go and ask the person that you're logging a claim about to also submit their documentation. You log a claim and then the answers to your claim must come. And I don't want it to be a situation where we assume what people will write in their application. It might be an employer, it might be an employee, it might be a shop steward that is writing a submission to us based on 10 employees and what has happened at their work. If we go a little bit further up to the beginning of the form, there is also a drop-down box to speak about the challenges. Ms. Adams, if you could quickly go back up to the initial questions which we dealt with. Oh, wait, go down a little bit more to number 4, I think. Let me see. Yes. So if you experience any challenges with the application or the payout of the funding, then you click yes. If you've clicked yes, you elaborate. Now, we're not telling you how to elaborate. You must write your own story for the committee instead of the committee assuming what your story is. And members, I would like to request that given that we already gone through number 4, that we do not duplicate questions in the end of the application, because we also don't want it to be a complicated process for someone on the ground. And that is my request to you. Members, would you be in order with that request?
Chair?
Member van der Westhuizen?
Yes, can I just ask, thank you very much. I rest my case. Can I just ask, would we also be open for people to just share their general experience of this process, or must they all, are they forced to take part in this questionnaire?
Okay, so if we remember correctly, quickly go up, Ms. Adams, to questions 1 and 2. Okay, so at question 2, when you click no, we indicated earlier you are also able to elaborate. And if you click yes, you're also able to elaborate. So where, for example, you don't specifically want to give a submission regarding the COVID claim, then you can write, for example, this is my experience. And we also don't dictate to people there how they should elaborate in the drop-down box. They must tell their story to us. And then we can also escalate that to the UIF specifically. Would that be in order, members?
If I read this correctly, you say if a user clicks yes, then the questions will drop down.
Yes. And then if the user clicks no, not only will you enter your details, but there will also be a new drop-down box. You see there at the last sentence, it says there will also be a new drop-down box to enter the details, which will be escalated to the UIF separately.
Okay. If I may just, sorry, Chair, for elaborating this, but if I say no, I haven't submitted the claim, but I didn't submit a claim because I felt that the paperwork was too onerous or whatever. Now, if user clicks no, you will be asked to elaborate on his or her non-covetous related UIF matter. And now I must provide my name, my ID number, my location where the claim was made. But I just answered no, I have not submitted a claim, but now I must provide the claim number. It just doesn't quite make sense. And I think some people would say,
colleagues, you will still receive a claim number for a non-covetous claim that you made. So for example, I received a query regarding maternity leave, which has been impacted because of the backlog of the UIF matters. Now, because we've previously resolved that non-TERS matters aren't going to be dealt with in this hearing, but we must still escalate them. We mustn't just show people away. So someone might have a maternity leave problem, and then some of the other questions will fall away regarding COVID TERS, and the new pop-up will come and say, okay, please give us your details regarding the maternity leave you claimed for. Colleagues, does that settle the query regarding this?
Chair, can you please help me? How do you cover the people that have never submitted a TERS claim because they've had a bad experience in the past, or they haven't got, didn't have at the time internet access or time for data with internet, etc. So they haven't submitted a claim, yet the user will be asked to provide a name, ID number, date and location where a claim was made. But I didn't make a claim. That is my point. The question is, have you submitted a claim to the UIF? No. Now, if user clicks no, you will be asked to give your claim number. It sounds to me as if you're caught in a circle here.
Colleagues, please remember that our public hearing is about the claims that were made based on COVID TERS money to the UIF. So we need to stick within our parameters. So if I make a claim because of COVID TERS money to the UIF, I'm entering the form. If I've made other claim to the UIF, like the maternity leave, I will still receive a claim number from the UIF regarding maternity leave. And thus, we can escalate that separately to the UIF. If I have not made any claim to the UIF, then members must please guide me, because I do not know why someone who has never made any claims would then fill in this form. Because if you are an employee, you would be able to have the reference number. What we can do is we can put that, because we put a section for the reference number, we can make it so that if you don't enter it, that it is not automatically that the application does not go through, because you must still put in your ID number. But a reference number, the UIF indicated, is important in order for them to deal with the claim that someone is complaining about. We must also do our best in the form to give the UIF the information they need so that the matter can be resolved. Member Maseko, I see your hand.
Thank you, Chair. I think, Chair, I don't know initially the reason for the form, but that is why I've been quiet to get the gist of why this form. And I think we have to think in a way of this is about the people out there, not us and the interpretation of the English and any other thing that is on the form. So does the form talk to what you wanted to achieve as a standing committee? Is there any loopholes to that form? That's where we have to say, are these questions answering what you want to achieve? Other than that, if a person, I mean, I looked at the form after I received it, And the questions are quite clear of what is it that you want to achieve. And I think at the standing committee, if there's any other extra information that will be needed after you have done all this, you still have a platform of the standing committee to continue with it and see where will be the loopholes. There's never been a form that doesn't have the loopholes. There's never been a form that wouldn't sort of instigate another more information to accumulate whenever you deal with the issue, especially with the issue that you don't have a mandate per se, is a UIF. You'll always have more questions as more as people, they do answer you. Even the departments, they do answer you. So if we can say this is a foundation of what we want to achieve and take it from there, I think we will be on the right track to do that. And it will be more questions that we'll want to ask. And we can always have a system of what is it that we're going to do to be able to get those answers.
Thank you. It is correct that we will also have an actual public hearing on the submissions that we receive, and that persons can then say, okay, we would like to make a submission at the public hearing, but that will also, how we structure the public hearing and which day and so on, will also depend on how many submissions and so on and requests that we get in. We also do indicate in the red section that we put the contact details there as well. I don't think there's a problem with someone entering information there, but perhaps we should then put a third box that just says other, and that a general box comes up and that you can write your other, and that all the other questions then fall away. That might assist then with that query. No, you don't take no out. You just put an other there. Other matters. Okay. And then what can occur is then if they click other matters, then a drop-down box can also maybe then where people can elaborate about what exactly is their concern. If it's not COVID related, and if it's not UIF related, then what is it that they would like to bring to our attention? Would this be in order?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think what would help is obviously if we could also see, I almost want to say the advert, or if we could just ask that in the wording or the invitation for people to comment, that we perhaps just, indicate there that this is an effort to assist people that have experienced problems with their TERS applications. And that therefore people that didn't even consider submission or, who missed the boat or something like that, that they don't get halfway into this process and then be perhaps frustrated. Because I have found in the past some of these online forms to be extremely frustrating because, obviously if your ID number hasn't got 13 digits, then you're stuck. And now you want to do it on behalf of a foreign national, etc. So I think the context in which this questionnaire is presented might also help.
Okay. Regarding the advert hasn't been drafted yet because we were waiting for the questions. If we are going to be signing off the advert as well, then I'm going to ask that members please do sign off via email and sign off on time, so that otherwise we don't frustrate the work of the procedural officer and of the public education office. They've also already engaged with DEA South Africa, and DEA South Africa said they'll make sure that their questions are an exact copy and paste of ours, so that people don't answer the wrong things, as we've seen in the ad hoc committee. Ms. Adams, by when can an advert be drafted?
I would say give me Friday so I can draft it and then it can be approved as well before I send it out.
Okay, so when can you send it to us?
Friday.
Friday, what time?
By 12.
Okay. Ms. Adams will send us the advert by 12. We must then can we please sign off by close of business because we need to get that advert also out as soon as possible so that we can give people enough time in order to make submissions and so that we can get the procurement system going. Members, would you be in order with that?
Chair, end of business, you know that we've got a full day program on Friday, so perhaps if we could just have a little bit more time.
Yes, I do know about that Friday program. I do know there's quite a few lunch and breaks and everything in that program as well. Perhaps then by Saturday morning at 12 o'clock.
Fine, thank you.
Happy? Okay. 12 o'clock on Saturday, we need to improve the advert that Ms. Adams will be sending to us on Friday, which will then give them enough time regarding the procurement processes and for people to send in submissions. Okay. Colleagues, on my list, this is all that I need to give feedback on. Are there any other matters? If none, thank you so much for today and for the robust discussion and engagement on the various briefings. I trust that you will have a wonderful week further. Stay safe and stay warm.
Apologies, Chair. Apologies for disrupting. We had minutes to adopt, but we
have
can.
Minutes. Okay.
We can roll it over if you wanted to the next meeting.
No, we have 4 minutes left. Let's quickly go through the minutes. But I see some of the other members are not online anymore. And I'm not sure if Member Maseko was part of that meeting.
I was not part of that, Chair. You'll have to roll over.
Yes. No, we'll have to roll this over, please, because we don't have enough members for the adopting of the minutes. Thank you so much, members. With that, stay safe, stay warm. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well done.
Bye.